Chapter 1142. Qiguangu was afraid of the beauty Wei Si, and he seemed to be very dissatisfied. When did this happen? My lord, you don't have any doubts? Jiang Pingji knew what he was talking about. She smiled and said, Zixiao has a secret, and it has something to do with me. Because of this secret, he came to me from 1,000 miles away and did his best to assist me. However, because the secret has not been made public, it is normal for Wen Zheng to have some doubts about him. If you want to know, I can tell you as long as you are willing to believe. Qiguan Rang was stunned for a moment, and then he returned to normal. No, my lord, it is enough that you know what to do. He shook his head. Although the grudge in his heart had not disappeared, it was not as heavy as before. My lord trusts Zixiao so much. If he dares to have second thoughts, I will be the first to not let him go. I will definitely eliminate him. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Wen Zheng, you underestimate me. Qiguan Rang said seriously, It is not that I don't trust you, my lord, but... He paused and did not say the rest of his words. The love between a man and a woman could easily make people lose their minds. Otherwise, how could pillow talk be so effective? The audience was watching the show. Qiguangu was really a warrior to say something like, eliminate Wei Si in front of the streamer. Even if it was a show of loyalty, wasn't he afraid of being put in a difficult position in the future? Thinking of Qiguan Rang's usual low-key and cautious style, the audience unanimously believed that he was not a person who liked to court death. He dared to say so he must have a certain degree of confidence. For example, Jiang Pingji's trust in him was no less than her trust in Wei Si. After the troops were organized, Jiang Pingji did not dare to delay and immediately set off with the troops. Yang Si accidentally dug a hole for himself and almost buried himself alive. Han Yu used the fire beacon to send a message to the troops stationed at Qichuan Plain. Before Yang Si and the others arrived at the border of Qichuan Plain, the troops stationed there had already organized their troops to intercept them. Yang Si gave up the idea of breaking through the encirclement. Breaking through the encirclement at this time would be courting death. The enemy was already prepared, and the effect of the sneak attack was far from what he expected. Even if he could successfully break through the encirclement, the delay would be enough for Han Yu to lead the troops to catch up. By then, he would face the awkward dilemma of being outflanked. Instead of that, it was better to play hide and seek with them and delay time. Yang Si's rogue tactic had a term in the game, kiting. Qin Gong advocated breaking out of the encirclement, and so did Qing Yuan. No one wanted to sit back and wait for death. 2 against 1, Yang Si's decision seemed strange. Qin Gong was very respectful to Yang Si because of the sock puppet, 5 tastes. Even if the two of them had different thoughts, he would still consult Yang Si seriously. Yang Si gave Qin Gong a look that said, You are worth teaching. He continued, Su Bei's troops aren't the only ones who can see the beacons on the Qichuan Plains. Our lord can see them as well. Qin Gong was surprised. But, military counselor, I don't think I've received any news from the Lord recently. If they wanted to see the beacon fire, then their Lord's army could not be far from Hu County. But Qin Gong didn't remember receiving any news about his Lord's army. Yang Si smiled and said, Could it be that Feng Jing has forgotten the declaration of war? Based on the distance the Lord took to send the declaration, the distance should not be too far. Qin Gong's eyes lit up, as if he had opened the door to a new world. Cheng Yuan asked, Military advisor Yang, are you saying that the Lord will send troops to support us? Yang Si replied, Yes, there is at least a 60% chance of success. There are many shrewd men under the Lord's command. How could they remain indifferent when they see the beacons on the Qichuan Plains? I'm sure they can guess our predicament and will definitely send troops to support us. Before the arrival of the reinforcements, Yang Si had to preserve as much of his combat strength as possible. Perhaps they could even kill a wave of enemies. Yang Si's courage was greater than the heavens. They were already in a precarious situation, yet he could still optimistically think about killing the enemy. Qin Gong said awkwardly, However, the terrain of the Qichuan Plains is flat. It's not easy to hide. Yang Si replied, You don't have to worry about that. I have my ways. As a result, Xie Zhe lost track of the enemy halfway through the chase. The scouts searched several times but couldn't find any traces of the enemy's army. How could more than 10,000 people disappear into thin air? Could they have grown wings and taken to the sky as a group? The scout cursed in his heart and braced himself to pass the news to Han Yu and Xianxia. They were about to catch up, but those bastards had disappeared without a trace. Han Yu pondered for a while and asked in a hoarse voice, "Is there a river nearby?" The scout thought for a while and said, "There is indeed one." "Is the river deep? How wide is it?" The scout didn't go down to check, so he didn't know how deep the river was, but he knew its width. "The river is more than 20 feet wide. I don't know how deep it is." Han Yu held back the blue veins that were throbbing and squeezed out an ugly smile. "Go and check it out." Xianxia understood. The military counselor suspects that they crossed the river and hid their traces. Soon, the scout came back to report the news. Because of the terrain, there wasn't much sand on the riverbed. The deepest part of the river was only as deep as an adult's chest. Han Yu said with a headache, "Using the water to escape. Yang Jingrong is really capable of anything." It wasn't winter or late autumn, so the river was cool. It would be nice to go for a swim. Search along the river and pay close attention to the beacons. Report to me as soon as you find any traces of the enemy. Unexpectedly, Yang Si didn't choose to break out of the encirclement. Instead, he avoided the soldiers stationed at the Sichuan plains and chose to hide. If it weren't for Han Yu's good upbringing, he would have scolded and cursed him harshly if it were someone else. "Damn it! How shameless!" Xianxia said, "Don't be angry, military counselor. They are marching and swimming. They won't last long. At this pace, they wouldn't even need to do anything. They would tire themselves to death." Han Yu looked serious. He thought that Yang Si must have something to rely on if he dared to do this. "Colonel Qin, are you okay?" Yang Si was a weak scholar. He didn't know how to swim, so he swam all the way with the help of the soldiers. Except for his wet clothes, he didn't look bad. In contrast, Qin Gong, a standard military general, looked a bit bad. He was panting, his cheeks were red, and his forehead was sweating. His wet clothes were sticky, but he couldn't take off his armor in case the enemy suddenly appeared and caught them off guard. "I'm okay." Qin Gong adjusted his breathing and glanced at the other soldiers. After a little rest, they returned to normal. They seemed to be very familiar with such behavior. None of them complained. Yang Si saw through his mind at a glance. He smiled and said, "My lord said that she would give you 10,000 elites. She won't cheat." After a short rest, the army set off again. They swam along the river at a very fast speed. The enemy couldn't catch up with them in a short time. Yang Si was thinking about what to do next. It would take time for the reinforcements of the Lord to arrive. He had to delay as much as possible. He would play hide and seek during the day and recuperate in the mountains at night. With a general idea, Yang Si was happy again. With his character, once he fell into the hands of the enemy, he would definitely be killed first and report later. Chapter 1143. Bah, those bastards are so good at running. The enemies were jumping up and down, and they were running everywhere. They were about to surround them several times, but they just slipped away. It was fine if it was only once or twice, but it was the same every time. Han Yu and the others were calm, but the soldiers were getting impatient. Their anger was rising, as if they had eaten a bomb. "Stop talking. If Commandant Xie or military advisor Han hears you, they'll have to suffer because of you." When Han Yu mentioned Han Yu and Xianxia, his comrade finally stopped talking, but he didn't look good. He looked like a stone in a latrine pit. Although Han Yu didn't hear the sound himself, he could see that the morale of the army was getting lower and lower. Xianxia was anxious as he saw it. He really wondered if Yang Si and the others had installed a pair of wind-fire wheels under their feet and were playing with them everywhere. They were so close to catching turtles in a jar several times. They always got out of trouble in a way that was beyond ordinary people's normal thinking. Are they addicted to playing hide and seek? In contrast, Han Yu was much calmer. He didn't look anxious at all. Xianxia wanted to say it several times, but he swallowed it after a few hesitations. Until now, Xianxia finally couldn't bear it anymore. He frowned worriedly. Military Counselor Han, the morale of our soldiers is low. If this goes on, I'm afraid there will be trouble. In the long run? Han Yu asked, how long do you think this long run will last, Commandant Xie? Xie was stunned for a moment. He was about to blurt it out, but he suddenly realized something and couldn't help but be stunned. Han Yu was smiling, but his eyes were cold. His tone was as calm as ever, as if Yang Xi's hide-and-seek and flying kites didn't cause him any confusion. He said, they are traveling light and can't carry much food. An army of more than 10,000 is not a small number, and the daily rations are an extremely large number. Even if everyone brings rations, how many days can one person carry? They were chasing from behind, while Yang Xi and the others were running in front. Because of the warning of the fire beacon, Yang Xi and the others couldn't hide their tracks, so they couldn't stay in one place for too long. They could only keep changing positions, marching and hiding in order to avoid the scouts. Being tense and running for their lives for a long period of time had imperceptibly increased the soldiers' need for food and further depleted their morale. The rations that could support them for 4 to 5 days might not even last 2 days. Looking at the situation, it seemed that Yang Xi was playing with them, but the first to collapse was definitely the side with a shortage of food. Yang Xi and the others did not have the support of the grain line, so they would not be able to hold on for long. Either they were too hungry to fight, or they had to break out of the encirclement before starvation killed them. The two armies clashed head-on. Lieutenant Xie, you don't have to be anxious, because your enemy is even more anxious than you. Han Yu was very patient. He exerted pressure on Yang Xi and the others at a steady pace, forcing them to increase the frequency of their escape, which further increased their physical exhaustion. This was both a psychological attack and a competition of endurance between the two armies. Whoever lost their composure first would lose. Yang Xi's combat style was bold and unrestrained. His thoughts were always different from others, and he was somewhat imaginative. Han Yu, on the other hand, was steady and sure. He conformed to the rules, but he didn't stick to the traditional way of thinking. He was meticulous and steady, and he was very calm. Just as Han Yu expected, Yang Xi's side encountered the predicament of food shortage, and they could only hold on for 1 more day. After that day, they could only fill their stomachs with water for the rest of the time. Seeing this, Qin Gong's young face was dyed with worry. Lieutenant Qin, why are you so anxious? Looking at his pale little face, Yang Xi couldn't bear to stand by and watch. He waved at Qin Gong, indicating that he should come over and rest, and not be so tense all the time. Come, sit down and talk. Here is a bag of water, drink it to quench your thirst. Qin Gong thanked Yang Xi for his kindness. He was a general, and his physical fitness was much better than Yang Xi, who was a scholar. At present, not only was there a shortage of food, but there was also a shortage of water. It was better to keep Yang Xi's water bag for himself. Qin Gong couldn't help but say, Military Counselor Yang, you are really not anxious at all, Yang Xi said. In a day or 2, we will run out of water and food. How can I not be anxious? Qin Gong carefully looked at his expression and said strangely, if Military Counselor is anxious, how can you be so calm? Yang Xi asked in reply, is it possible that if I am anxious, food and water will appear out of thin air? Qin Gong. This was the first time he heard someone say the words, broken jar, in such a righteous and confident manner. Qin Gong said, there is a shortage of food, and morale is shaken. In the end, won't we still become the enemy's turtles in a jar? Yang Xi smiled as he looked at Inspector Cheng Yuan and said, it's true that there is a shortage of food, but the shaken morale is exaggerated. Qin Gong was stunned for a moment, and suddenly realized something. For an ordinary army, even if there was only half a month left, the morale of the army would be in a state of collapse, much less a day's supply. As the food shortage approached, there would inevitably be soldiers who deserted or were afraid to fight. The longer time dragged on, the more deserters there would be. This was almost unavoidable. To give a ready-made example, Su Fei had been besieged in Mountain Urn City for several months. The water soldiers he had recruited were the first to escape. As time passed, their number reached more than 30,000. They fled in all directions, became bandits, and harmed the people. After that were the soldiers who were qualified to lead the army, and then the trusted troops. Those who were willing to stay and live and die with the army in times of danger were basically all loyal elites. Qin Gong had been tense for the past few days, and did not notice this for a while. The army of more than 10,000 had fled east and west for several days, and their food and fodder were getting increasingly scarce. The soldiers under them had not reported any deserters. This was simply impossible. Xianxia saw that he was in a trance, and the corner of his mouth curled up into a sneer. I have said before, my lord, that you are leading 10,000 elites. They must be genuine elites. Qin Gong's heart was touched, and he could not say a word for a long time. But, I have disappointed my lord. Qin Gong knew how rare it was to have 10,000 elites. They had all been built with a lot of money, food, and a lot of effort. Losing 10,000 at once, Qin Gong would not be able to make up for it even if he plucked off his own brain. What does this have to do with you? If you want to blame someone, blame Qiguan Wenjing. His declaration caught us off guard, and we became the fish in the moat. Xianxia secretly grinned. If he was lucky enough to survive, he would definitely beat up Qiguan Rang's house and make him compensate. Qin Gong thought that Xianxia was comforting him, and he could not get rid of the guilt in his heart. He did not expect Jiang Pingji to place such high hopes on him right from the start. This trust made his heart feel sour, but at the same time very warm. Qin Gong endured it and racked his brain to find another topic to talk about. For a general, there was no greater sense of accomplishment than training a fierce army of tigers and wolves. He wanted to know who trained these 10,000 elites behind him. This question was a little difficult. Everyone has a share. Xianxia said uncertainly, moreover, the birth of the elites is not all due to one person. Chapter 1144. Seeing that Qin Gong was puzzled, Xianxia couldn't help but give him the general knowledge of the Wanzhou group so that Qin Gong wouldn't make a fool of himself in the future. Why not? The so-called elite troops are no less than elite weapons. They also need elite soldiers, Xianxia said. Xianxia said, these elite soldiers not only have to be strong, brave, and good at fighting, but they also have to be disciplined and obey orders. Only those who can do these two things can be called elite. Xianxia told Qin Gong about the tricks of training soldiers in the Wanzhou group. A strong body, brave and good at fighting, this is military strength. Strict discipline, strict execution of orders, this is military discipline. It was not difficult to do the former. There was only one word: train. Train to the death. The training plan that Jiang Pingji had formulated for her troops had been used to this day. The troops were trained in winter and summer, when the weather was the worst. Whether it was in the heat of summer or the cold of winter, as long as they were not too sick to get up, they had to get up to train. After they had formed a certain level of strength, Jiang Pingji would also organize military exercises. Military exercises included various combat environments. Xianxia glanced at the resting troops and said lightly, not to mention that there's only 1 or 2 days of military rations left. Even if they run out of ammunition and rations for 7 or 8 days, they have to eat weeds and tree bark. Military exercises are like real battles. No one deserts then, and no one will commit crimes now. Qin Gong was flabbergasted, but he had an urge to give it a try. He had never thought that training troops could be done this way. The so-called military exercises were real swords and spears, not putting on airs. But, with such harsh measures, why doesn't anyone desert? Although he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Qin Gong could imagine the severity and cruelty of training troops after hearing Xianxia's description. The tyranny of the king and the rebellion of the people, yet none of these troops resisted or were dissatisfied. Qin Gong's attention was attracted by Xianxia's words. For a moment, he forgot his previous worries. Xianxia smiled. Hardness is easy to break, softness is easy to bend. It's the same for training troops. Using both the carrot and the stick is the right way. Elites could not be trained hard. Not only did they need tough training methods, but they also needed a soft policy of appeasement. Soldiers were also human. They could not all be unparalleled loyal, and they could not be expected to use love to spontaneously pledge loyalty to Jiang Pingji. Yang Si pointed to the troops and said, "For them, the price of deserting or being passive is far higher than dying in battle." Qin Gong was dumbfounded. What kind of technique was this? Yang Si stretched out 2 fingers and said, "One is military discipline, and the other is welfare." Jiang Pingji had considered the issue of military discipline when she set up the army. She even put military discipline in the first place and formulated strict military rules. The soldiers were all peasants, and almost none of them could read. It was very troublesome to talk to them about military rules and discipline. Jiang Pingji used the method of violent brainwashing. Regardless of whether it was winter or summer, she would shout about military rules and discipline 3 times a day in the morning, afternoon, and evening. Since the promotion of the new rhymes of Chinese, not only the common people were required to learn rhymes, but even the soldiers in the barracks had to learn them. Not only did he have to complete the regular training, but he also had to learn literacy from the political commissar. The position of political commissar was created by his lord, and he enjoyed the treatment of a centurion. His main job was to educate the soldiers' ideology. The primer was not the teaching material of the Golden Scale Academy, but the military rules that the soldiers were so familiar with that they could almost recite them backwards. As if brainwashing and education were not enough, Jiang Pingji also linked military discipline with pension benefits and retirement benefits. This move was extremely insidious. Once the soldiers violated military discipline, they would be directly recorded in their files. Not only would it affect the individual's salary and future promotion, but it would also affect retirement benefits or pension benefits for those who died in battle. Since the establishment of the Golden Scale Academy, these 2 benefits included the qualifications for future generations to go to school. This rule was too terrible. Under the use of both carrot and stick, which soldier dared to escape? For the sake of their families and children, they would rather starve to death in battle than violate military discipline and become deserters. Qin Gong was so shocked that he opened his mouth slightly. One sentence was written all over his face. Could it be played this way? Yang Si patted his shoulder. Qin Gong was still too young. If he was shocked now, what would he do in the future? After resting for a while, the scouts found traces of the enemy and hurriedly sent the news back. Yang Si sighed softly. Enduring the pain all over his body, he stood up and said, "Colonel Qin, gather the troops and horses. Let's go." This long game of hide and seek, or cat and mouse, would be decided sooner or later. Another 2 days passed. Han Yu, who was originally calm, had a grave expression on his face. Yang Si and the others were still as slippery as before. They did not seem to be in distress due to the food shortage. The scouts also did not find any deserters. Could it be that his judgment was wrong? Did Yang Si take all his belongings with him to escape? If so, he should change his way of thinking and think again about what Yang Jingrong was up to. Someone, quickly go and ask if there is any unusual movement at the border of Hu County. Something was not right. Everything was not right. He knew Yang Si's temperament very well. He would not get up early without benefits. He would never do meaningless things. If there were enough water and food, Yang Si would not stay in the Sichuan plain. It was a pure waste of time. He would have found a way to escape. Now he was still circling around the Sichuan plain. It was more like a cornered beast fighting. If so, the question came back to itself. Did Yang Si lack food? If there was a shortage of food, how could he explain that there were no deserters and the marching speed was not reduced? If there was no shortage of food, Yang Si's actions puzzled him. Han Yu thought about it again and carefully connected the routes that Yang Si had escaped along these days. The routes were twisted and complicated. They seemed to be irregular, but they were all heading towards the northern border of Hu County. Report, the news has been found. The voice of the messenger interrupted his thoughts. Say it. The messenger said, Lu Shi divided his troops and attacked Hu County directly. Han Yu suddenly thought of something and accidentally knocked over the bamboo slips on the table. Yang Jingrong, you actually had this idea. It was not that Yang Si did not lack food. It was obvious that he had used a smokescreen to deceive others. Coincidentally, Xie found another place. Unfortunately, he was one step too late. Yang Si had already escaped with his troops. They escaped faster than a rabbit. Did Captain Xie check the remains of their bonfire? Han Yu asked. Xie said, yes. Han Yu asked, is there any trace of cooking? Xie thought back carefully, and a troubled expression appeared on his face. He had not noticed this. Han Yu went to the bonfire in person and was suddenly enlightened. The bonfire was messed up. It looked like the traces left by people fleeing in a hurry. In fact, it was to cover up the food that was not cooked. This is a good smoke screen, but it's a pity, Han Yu said decisively. Captain Xie, assemble the troops and go to Gusu. Gusu was located in the mountains north of the Sichuan plain. Xie was surprised. Counselor, are we not going to catch Yang Si? Catch him. Han Yu said, it's like catching a turtle in a jar. According to their own speed, they would definitely be able to reach Gusu before Yang Si and the others. The next day at noon, Yang Si and the others had been without food for 2 days. The soldiers were in good condition, but their combat power was less than half of the usual. At this time, Gusu was close at hand. If it is as I expected, I will be able to meet up with the master in half a day. Chapter 1145. Fengjing, tell everyone to be careful. I don't feel good about it. Yang Si looked around suspiciously. He had an inexplicable shadow in his heart, as if something bad was about to happen. Qin Gong said, okay, I will send the order to all the battalions to be on guard. Qing Yuan asked, did you notice anything wrong? Yang Si said, Gong Liao, who do you think our opponent is? Han Wenbin is one of Master Yuanjing's favorite students. It won't be easy to take advantage of him. Underestimating the enemy is a taboo for a military strategist. Underestimating the enemy will inevitably bring disaster to us. Send the order to the soldiers to be on guard. Don't relax at all times. We are not far from Gusu. Don't fail here. Because Cheng Cheng and Master Yuanjing were good friends, Cheng Yuan could occasionally enjoy Master Yuanjing's guidance. In Cheng Yuan's opinion, no matter how talented the knowledgeable old man was, it was not worth being surprised. The wind was blowing, and the leaves and grass were rustling. Han Yu was wearing a black Confucian robe. His long hair was tied into a crown. He had lost a lot of weight after days of running around. The blue veins on his forehead were clearly visible. He put his hands behind his back and looked in a certain direction. He could faintly see more than 10,000 soldiers and horses rushing toward Gusu like squirming ants. Han Yu fixed his eyes on them and found that the ants had changed from their previous loose posture to a marching formation that could be used for both offense and defense. Xie also noticed the change and said in surprise, Counselor Han, have they already found out? Han Yu said calmly, if they found out, they would have turned around and left this troublesome place. Why would they walk right into the trap? If it were someone else, they would be so happy that they would let down their guard and reveal a fatal flaw. Yang Jingrong is different. He is a cautious and suspicious person. The more dangerous the situation is, the more suspicious he will be. This caution will let him linger on for a little longer. Xie blinked and tilted his head to look at Han Yu's side profile. He always felt that his counselor did not hate Yang Si as much as he said. Not only did he not hate him, but he even considered him a confidant. However, the custom of the literati group was that the more confidant they were, the more ruthless they were. As a general, he could not understand it for the time being. If we can capture Yang Si alive, you can try to persuade him, Xie said. People with different principles cannot make plans together. Yang Si's principles are different from yours. Besides, Han Yu curled his lips into a sarcastic smile. For Yang Si, there is no one in this world who is more suitable for him than Lu Lanting. If he is captured, only death awaits him. A look of confusion appeared on Xie's face as he asked, why is that? A fine bird chooses a good tree to nest in. Since Yang Si Ruo was captured, whether it was for his future or for his family's life, submitting to the new master was the best choice. The military counselor had previously said that Yang Si was not a stickler for rules. In order to protect myself, What's wrong with seeking a new master? Han Yu didn't intend to explain in detail. Yang Si was the son of a prostitute. His status was even lower than that of a lowly person. In the eyes of his lord, Su Bei, it was hard for him to enter the upper echelons of society. If Yang Si was not lucky enough to be carried away by Yuan Jing, who lived in the folk, what would his fate be now? Either they had died a long time ago, or they were just pimps that ran errands in brothels, waiting to be ordered around. Plot against the world and assist the feudal vassals? There was no need to even think about it. Yang Si's status was destined to not be put in an important position by Su Bei. He was also a sensitive and proud person, so he couldn't accept such humiliation. Han Yu knew him well, so he would give Yang Si a quick death. On the other side, the ominous premonition in Yang Si's heart was getting stronger and stronger. He was almost in a state of panic. Something's not right. It was a sunny day, but Yang Si broke out in a cold sweat. His hands were tightly gripping the reins. Get into formation, turn around and return. By the time the order was given, half of the army had already passed through the lonely gorge. The hills on both sides were lush with trees, casting shadows. Yang Si's gaze was focused on the wild goose that was flying high in the sky. Qin Gong didn't doubt him and immediately gave the order. As soon as he gave the order, 2 flags with the words Su and Xia appeared on both sides. Yang Si saw an old acquaintance. You don't have to leave now that you're here, Han Yu said condescendingly. Jing Rong, we haven't seen each other for a few months. How are you? How the F***ck? Yang Si's face tightened, but he was swearing inelegantly in his heart. Han Yu wouldn't give Yang Si any time to react. The prepared rolling stones rolled down from both sides of the mountain path, and the arrows were like a tide. He had originally planned to destroy more than half of Yang Si's army, and then slowly nibble away the rest of the defeated soldiers. According to Han Yu's expectation, when half of the army was deep in the gorge, the front army would retreat in panic. It would definitely mess up the formation and cause a situation where people would crowd and block the mouth of the gorge. The front army couldn't retreat in time, and the rear army couldn't support, so the order would collapse. But Xie was surprised. They are indeed elites. They can still maintain the formation at this moment. The military counselors said that they have been out of food for a couple of days. They should have low morale and no fighting power. Now that I look at them, they are not that bad. It's a pity to bury them here. Xie didn't have the slightest intention of showing mercy even though he said it was a pity. Countless rolling stones and hot oil splashed down, and screams resounded through the entire gorge. Xie commanded the archers to shoot at the mouth of the gorge. The mouth of the gorge became the main target of the archers to destroy the support of the rear army and the retreat of the front army. Protect the military counselor. Qin Gong shot down the arrows that were rushing toward Yang Si, but he only had 2 hands. How could he compete with the hundreds of archers of the enemy? More than a dozen shield soldiers raised their shields and formed a formation. They used the shields to block the stray arrows and protected Yang Si and Qing Yuan in the chaos. Yang Si was in a mess. There was an arrow in his shoulder. If the arrow had been shot a little bit higher, it would have gone straight through his brain. Yang Si spat out a mouthful of blood and said, "But I played with eagles all my life, and I was almost pecked blind by an eagle." He let out a cry of pain, and his whole face scrunched up because of the severe pain. Finally, he swallowed it back. Qin Gong made sure that Yang Si and the others were safe, then he commanded the soldiers to form a formation and retreat. As long as they left the gorge, they still had a chance of survival. Hot oil splashed. Rolling stones and arrows were blind. They didn't care who was who. Whoever was hit by the rolling stones would be the unlucky one. For a moment, no one knew how many soldiers were injured by the arrows and crushed by the rolling stones. Their bones turned into minced meat and blood. Xie said, "Get the bow." He knocked the bow and pulled the arrow, aiming at Qin Gong below. The soldiers were already in chaos, and morale was shaken. Once the main general died, the army that was in a precarious situation would definitely collapse. The arrow pierced through the air and locked onto him as if it had eyes. Qin Gong felt a chill run down his spine, and a sense of danger rose to his head. He barely managed to shoot it down, but he couldn't dodge another stray arrow. The sharp arrowhead slashed across the side of his face, and blood stained his right eye. Chapter 1146. After leaving behind more than 3,000 corpses, Xianxia and the others retreated from the lonely gorge with the wounded soldiers. However, Xianxia did not feel the slightest joy of escaping because they did not have enough supplies. They were just struggling at death's door. If he were Han Yu, he would not let go of such a good opportunity. He would naturally take advantage of the situation to kill them. Qing Yuan supported Xianxia. He was already hungry. After this incident, he was so weak that he almost could not stand. Xianxia endured the pain and said, "Gong Liao, go and tell Colonel Qin to immediately organize the uninjured soldiers and retreat quickly." Qing Yuan understood the other meaning. He resisted the urge to faint and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Military counselor, I will delay them for a while with the remaining troops." Xianxia was very calm. Even though he was in so much pain that he could not stand up straight, his mind was exceptionally clear. For a strategist, weighing the pros and cons was an innate instinct. Even if he had to sacrifice himself, he would not hesitate to do it in order to achieve the greatest benefit. "My lord, the reinforcements will arrive in less than half a day. We can't let these more than 10,000 elites be completely annihilated by the enemy." Under such circumstances, the outcome of staying behind to cover the retreat was definitely a dead end. Qing Yuan involuntarily grasped Xi's shoulder and helped him retreat a few steps. "If the military counselor dies, how will I explain it to my lord?" Qing Yuan was anxious at this moment. His hands, feet, and brain did not feel like his own. It was not that he was useless. As a greenhorn, Qing Yuan had too little actual combat experience and accumulated too little experience. Xianxia could not help but grin. Qing Yuan was going crazy. He could still laugh in such a situation. "If I were alive, I would not have the face to see my lord." Xianxia smiled bitterly. He was too reckless and lost to Han Yu by one move. The elite troops that the lord had handed over to him were greatly damaged. How could he have the face to see Jiang Pengji? Qing Yuan's breathing became rapid and heavy. Xianxia held his wrist tightly. He never thought that Xianxia, who was thin and weak, would have such great strength. Xianxia pushed Qing Yuan away, and the other party almost stumbled. "This is a military order. How dare you disobey? As a strategist, you are indecisive and can't make a decision in front of the battle. Do you want to kill more troops in the future?" It seemed to be deafening, and Qing Yuan was shocked. "My lord may not come. It is better to fight with our lives on the line. Leaving Xianxia and more than 2,000 wounded soldiers behind would definitely kill them." Xianxia said firmly, "My lord will come." Qing Yuan gritted his teeth and passed the message to Qin Gong. Qin Gong thought for a while and ordered the troops to be divided. "My injuries are heavy. I don't want to be a burden, so I won't leave." Qin Gong's injuries were indeed very serious. There was a long gash on his face, 2 arrow wounds on his right arm, a saber wound on his left shoulder, and an injury on his leg. Fortunately, his leg injury was not serious. He could still ride a horse and fight again. The vanguard narrowly escaped from the call, but most of them were wounded and heavily injured. Almost all of them had to stay behind to cover the rear. The situation of the rear army was not bad. Although there were casualties, it was not serious. Their combat strength was still relatively intact. Han Yu and the others didn't give Xianxia much time. Their pursuers were right behind them. Xianxia took a deep breath and grabbed his sword with his blood-stained hand. "If there is a next life, I will serve you as my master. Today, please forgive me for being a step ahead and being unable to be loyal," he murmured, already prepared to die. Xianxia knew his situation and choice better than Han Qin. If he was captured, he would die. Su Bei and Prince Changsho were birds of the same feather. They respected bloodline and family and despised the poor. However, the former was better looking than the latter and knew how to pretend to be peaceful. Xianxia jumped ship and kicked Prince Changsho out because of this. If he surrendered to Su Bei to protect himself, It would be a great humiliation for Yang Si. It was better than being ridiculed. Get into formation and fight the enemy. Yang Si waved his sword. He was unafraid of death. Report. Enemy attack from the rear. Han Qin was shocked. Enemy? So fast? In an instant, he confirmed the identity of the attacker. He looked in the direction of the rear troops and could vaguely see that their formation had been disrupted. Xie was just about to lead his troops to kill the remnants of Yang Si's army when he suddenly heard the messenger's words. Enemy? Han Qin said, Yang Si's reinforcements. They had arrived 6 hours earlier than expected. They had thought that they would be able to get rid of the remnants of Yang Si's troops before retreating and making Lu Shi suffer a loss. Xie was stunned. Where did Yang Si's reinforcements come from? Han Qin said, Yang Si has been avoiding the battle. He led his troops to Chichuan Plain in order to save his troops and meet up with the reinforcements. If they break out on their own, more than half of them will die. If the reinforcements come, they can at least preserve their strength and deter our army. Unfortunately, Yang Si's wishful thinking was completely disrupted by Han Qin. Xie was puzzled. Our army did not intercept their letter. How could the reinforcements come so coincidentally? Han Qin said, Fire beacon? Because of the fire beacon, Lu Shi guessed that Yang Si was in trouble. It was not surprising that he sent reinforcements. Xie immediately understood and asked, Counselor, what should we do now? Han Qin said, It is not advisable to fight. If it was a frontal battle, there was no need to panic. But the reinforcements attacked from the rear and disrupted their formation. They could not organize an effective resistance for a while. The longer they waited, the more casualties they would suffer. If Yang Si reacted and cooperated with the reinforcements to attack them from both sides, the situation would be even more disadvantageous. Han Yu made up his mind in a split second. Han Qin and Yang Si had similar temperaments. Both of them were decisive and ruthless people. Once they made a decision, they would not hesitate. If it was someone else, they would insist and beat Yang Si to death even if it was a risk, because there was no other way out. If Han Qin really did that, the troops he led would definitely be swallowed by Jiang Pingji, and no one would be left alive. Yang Si was trying his best to kill as many enemies as he could before he died, but he found that the enemy was gone. Counselor, the enemy's rear army is in chaos. Qin Gong was riding a horse. His vision was much higher than Yang Si's. He could vaguely see the enemy's rear army being destroyed by the unfamiliar forces. Yang Si was stunned for a moment. He was so stunned that he almost couldn't react. My lord's reinforcements. Yang Si dropped his sword excitedly. He was so happy that his wound was torn. He cried out in pain. Qin Gong's heart skipped a beat. Reinforcements? Were there really reinforcements? What they didn't know was that Jiang Pingji, the reinforcements they were talking about, was in a bad mood. The audience in the streaming room could feel the surging killing intent from her. The screen that was full of bullet screens was now empty. Everyone was so scared that they did not dare to speak. Want to escape? Little white neighed. Jiang Pingji suddenly pulled out the God Slayer from her waist. The bright snow-white blade was shining with a cold light. Chapter 1147. Lieutenant Xie, sound the gongs to retreat. Han Yu didn't hesitate at all. He even gave up the meat that was about to be in his mouth and let Yang Si go. Xie was leading his men to kill the enemy when he suddenly received such an order. His emotions fluctuated greatly and he almost vomited blood. The deputy general was so excited that his eyes were bloodshot. He blurted out, "The advisor is confused." Xie gritted his teeth and chose to follow Han Yu's judgment. He gave the order to retreat. The military advisor must have his reasons for doing this. We just have to follow his orders. Xie's face was taut, his eyes stained with blood from the killing. No matter how dissatisfied I am, military orders must be obeyed. How can I question them now? Don't say anything more. Retreat, retreat. The deputy general was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. Although the position of a military advisor had the right to supervise military affairs, to put it bluntly, It was just an official subordinate to the general. It was mostly an advisor who mainly came up with ideas and strategies. The strategists under different vassals were also different. Some were just staff officers with no military power, some had partial military power, and some were under the command of the Genha strategists who were in charge of the entire army. Han Yu wasn't an ordinary military advisor, but Su Bei didn't completely delegate his authority to Han Yu to be a military advisor. In short, Xie Zhe, as the commander-in-chief, did not need to listen to Han Yu. "Big brother, can't you have your own opinion?" The deputy general was furious with Xie Zhe, but he didn't dare to disobey orders and could only choose to retreat. Only when he retreated did he realize that his rear army was almost completely routed by the enemy. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. How many enemies had ambushed them? 10,000 or 20,000? In fact, Jiang Pingji had only brought 3,000 troops and horses with her to provide support. The remaining 7,000 troops were still on their way and would take about 15 minutes to arrive. Seeing with her own eyes the bloody corpses, rolling stones, arrowheads, and burning oil that littered the ground of the lonely forest canyon, her anger soared to the breaking point. "My lord, there are less than 10,000 corpses in the valley. Many of the corpses are still warm. It can be seen that the tragic battle happened not long ago." Jiang Nongqin's face was solemn as well. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted, and her cold eyes were emotionless. "My lord, please send me to lead the troops to chase after them." Jiang Pingji sneered and said, "No need, I'll go." Thus, she took 3,000 people with her and left at the fastest speed possible. What was embarrassing was that the 3,000 soldiers were unable to catch up to Whitey, who was galloping at full speed. They were left behind by Whitey by several hundred feet. She didn't care about the enemy's front and rear armies. She attacked as soon as she saw them and didn't show any mercy. Jiang Pingji's expression was unprecedentedly gloomy. There was almost no pause in the God Slayer. Whenever the blade lit up, it would definitely reap a few lives. Quang, there was a dull sound of collision as the enemy's rear army reacted and tried to block with their swords and shields. Jiang Pingji exerted some force with her wrist, and the few tiger-headed bronze shields were cut in half by the God Slayer. The cut was smooth and neat. Little White raised its hooves and stomped on the enemy soldiers, taking away the stupefied shield-bearers. The blade of the god-slaying saber was still as shiny as new. There was not a single crack or scratch on it. Courting death, Jiang Pingji had already rushed into the enemy's formation. In such a situation, the enemy would always attack the mount first. Dozens of soldiers hid behind the shield wall. They held long spears in their hands and stabbed at Little White, who was under Jiang Pingji. From the enemy's point of view, Little White was her mount. Even if she didn't lose any of her riding gear and armor, if she was really stabbed by the long spear, she would definitely lose control due to the pain and indirectly affect Jiang Pingji, who was on the horse. As long as she fell off the horse, could the silver-armored young general fly into the sky? Little did they know that someone had been in the sky and had never come down. Their intentions were seen through by Jiang Pingji. With a twist of her wrist, the god-slaying saber turned over. She was as fast as a ghost. The blade cut off all the horizontal and straight blades on the long spear, leaving only a smooth piece of wood. The speed of the wood did not decrease. It stabbed the fish-scale armor on Little White's body. It was like a normal person walking on the street who was suddenly hit by a stick. Little White snorted in pain. His anger soared, and he went on a rampage even more ferociously. His hooves added more souls to his body. Kill! Jiang Pingji rushed dozens of feet into the enemy's formation before the 3,000 troops arrived. When the enemies met, their eyes turned red. When the two sides fought, it was a life-and-death battle. Their battle cries soared to the sky. The morale of Jiang Pingji's side was like a rainbow. They attacked the enemy's rear army and had the advantage of surprise. The enemy was caught unprepared. Jiang Pingji's performance was too dazzling. She single-handedly stirred up one side and caused the enemy's formation to collapse. The soldiers under her command were already full of anger. When they saw their former comrades die in the lonely gorge, their anger was added to their grief and indignation. Now, all these emotions had turned into hostility. With only 3,000 troops, they had defeated the enemy's rear army of 7,000. Jiang Pingji alone had slaughtered countless people. The god-slaying saber in her hand was full of human blood. It looked even colder and more terrifying. Who on earth is that? Deputy General Xie was scared out of his wits. He had no time to complain about Xie's obedience to Han Yu's orders. He asked Xie. How would Xie answer? Han Yu was very far away. He could only see a vague figure, but he was very familiar with the figure. Suddenly, Han Yu clenched his fists tightly. When he saw through Yang Xi's plan, he knew that Wanzhou would send reinforcements to support Yang Xi. But he never thought that the reinforcements would be Lu Shi. In order to save his subordinates, a feudal lord risked his life and went into battle. He didn't know if Yang Xi was lucky or unlucky. It was not a good thing for the plotters to have such an emotional lord. But Han Yu felt a little envious of Yang Xi. Lieutenant Xie, mobilize the archers. We must kill that silver-armored soldier. The biggest disadvantage of Jiang Pingji's side was the lack of long-range forces. After all, they were rushing to rescue the soldiers and provide support, so they couldn't bring a lot of supplies and machinery. Xie did as he was told without any hesitation. Yang Xi was the first to notice the movement on Han Yu's side. He was so angry that his whole face turned pale. Han Wenbin had already recognized the lord. Lieutenant Qin, quickly go and protect the lord. Mobilize the troops to contain the enemy's central army. We can't let Han Wenbin's wishful thinking succeed. Qin Gong immediately responded and rushed out on his horse. His reaction was a little slow. He finally realized what Yang Xi had said. Protect the lord? Wait, the lord is here? Qin Gong looked cold and ruthless, but his heart was trembling with fear. Qin Gong couldn't be blamed for not recognizing Jiang Pingji. Generally speaking, he had only seen Jiang Pingji twice. Both times, Jiang Pingji had appeared in women's clothing. Anyone who was not blind would not be able to mistake her gender. Now, she had changed into men's clothing. She was wearing a dignified and heavy armor. She also had an aura of 2.8 meters. Killing people was like cutting vegetables. It would be strange if Qin Gong could not recognize her. After the shock, Qin Gong was touched and worried. He was afraid that something bad would happen to Jiang Pingji. Chapter 1148. Qin Gong was so anxious that he ignored his injuries and rushed toward Jiang Pingji with his troops. Before he arrived, the sky was filled with arrows. They were all aimed at the people around Jiang Pingji. My lord, Qin Gong was so anxious that he yelled and pulled at his wounds. If he was hit by the arrows, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. Jiang Pingji snorted and put the god slayer back into its sheath. She grabbed 2 enemies by the neck and used them as meat shields. Little White also cleverly escaped into the crowd and charged around, using them as meat targets. She threw away the 2 dead bodies and unsheathed the god slayer again to clean up the surrounding enemies. Little White came back. Jiang Pingji grabbed its reins and mounted the horse again. While galloping, the blade cut off several people's necks as if it was cutting wheat. Little White rushed out of the shooting range of the arrows with Jiang Pingji on his back. He made a detour to the other side. It was an accurate, dangerous, and exciting maneuver, but Jiang Pingji didn't change her expression. She killed the people in front of her and cut the horses in front of her. Qin Gong was speechless. He didn't believe it was his lord. The military counselor must have made a mistake. Qin Gong's mind was in a mess, but he still maintained a cold expression and looked very calm. On the other side, Xie saw that the arrows didn't work, so he asked Han Yu, military counselor, the silver-armored general seems to be fine. Should we? Han Yu said decisively, the opportunity is gone. Don't waste your time. Retreat. Opportunities on the battlefield were fleeting. It was Han Yu's fault that he didn't seize the opportunity. Xie pursed his lips. He could only act according to the plan and suppress his curiosity. What was the silver-armored general's identity? The military counselor changed his mind at the last minute. It showed that the silver-armored general's status was not low. He was at least a core figure. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been worth the military counselor's attention. Xie admired Han Yu from the bottom of his heart, but the lieutenant next to him was full of resentment. Han Yu was not the military counselor who had total military power. Han Yu and Xie shared half of the military power. Han Yu was just a civilian who gave advice and suggestions. How could he order Xie around and change the military order at the last minute? The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He couldn't help but blame the failure of the mission on Han Yu. Han Yu made a big fuss but didn't gain much. He finally got the upper hand, but he changed his mind and withdrew his troops at the last minute. What was he trying to do? As they retreated, Xie couldn't help but ask his own question. Counselor, just who is that silver-armored young general? Xie had studied the generals under Jiang Pingji's tent. At first, he suspected that the silver-armored general was Li Yun. However, Li Yun only used a long spear. He had heard that his spear technique was superb, almost as good as the Xie family's heirloom. Could it be that not only was Li Yun adept at using the spear, he was also an expert with the saber? Han Yu was still regretting that he had missed such a good opportunity. He asked Xie, "Guess who that person is?" Xie said, "I personally thought it was Li Yun, but I'm not sure." Moreover, if it were Li Yun, Han Yu would not think so highly of him. Li Yun was Jiang Pingji's military general, but he was not irreplaceable. Even Fu Wang did not have this weight. Xie racked his brains but could not think of Jiang Pingji as the target. Han Yu said, "That is Lu Shi." Xie nodded and said, "Oh, so it is Lu Shi." Lu, he was dumbfounded. Whose name did he just hear? The enemy's vassal, Lu Lanting. What a pity. Han Yu's words were full of pity. It was not a big deal to kill a general on the battlefield. If the enemy's leader was killed, the forces in Wanzhou would be in chaos and the Lord would not have to worry anymore. Lu Shi? Xie almost bit his tongue. That silver-armored young general was Lu Shi? Han Yu said, "What else? It's a pity that he did not kill her. I'm afraid there will not be such a good opportunity in the future." Xie felt that his worldview had been turned upside down. Who would have thought that a vassal would at most be in the middle of the army? Why would he personally fight with a sword? It's a pity that such a vassal did not become a general. Xie told a lame joke, but Han Yu was not in the mood to laugh. No one would feel good if all their efforts were in vain. Xie said, "This is my fault. You don't have to blame yourself." It was the duty of a military counselor to give advice, but it was his job to kill the enemy. It must be his fault that he failed to kill Lu Shi. Han Yu shook his head. His face, which was already much thinner, looked a little gloomy and cold. Since Han Yu had given the order immediately, they did not suffer many casualties. They ran away faster than rabbits. Jiang Pingji chased for a while and killed more than 100 people. In the end, she could only look at the dust that was raised by the enemy and grit her teeth. The battle had just ended, and Jiang Nongqin had already arrived with the remaining troops. She did not see Jiang Pingji. She first saw Yang Si, who was pale and had lost a lot of blood. He was sitting on a rock, dispirited. "Is the military counselor injured?" Jiang Nongqin asked. Then she changed the topic to Jiang Pingji. "Where is the Lord now?" As she spoke, she asked the female medics who had followed the army to come forward. The two sturdy female soldiers walked forward with medical boxes on their backs. If it were not for their figures, people would not be able to tell that they were women. Yang Si tried to lift his arm, but the arrow wound was pulled. He grimaced in pain. The female soldier looked at the wound and said, "The arrow wound is a little deep. You have to take off your clothes? Does the military counselor want someone to cover you with a cloth?" The corner of Yang Si's mouth twitched. No, he was a man, but he still had to be bashful when looking at the wound. He always felt that his manliness was inferior to the female soldiers in front of him. The female soldier took out a pair of big scissors and cut open his clothes, revealing the location of the arrow wound. Fortunately, the arrowhead was not rusty or poisoned. If it was treated well and cared for carefully, the possibility of infection and pus was relatively low. The female soldier treated the wound and applied anesthetic. She waited for the effect to spread before she pulled out the arrow. "Forget it. Let me do it." Although there was anesthetic, it was still painful. The female soldier did not dare to use too much force, which made Yang Si feel even more pain. Jiang Nongqin, who was standing at the side, could not stand it anymore. She took the initiative to help. Yang Si was about to modestly decline, but she pressed his shoulder with one hand and pulled out the arrow with the other. Without giving him any time to prepare, he felt a sharp pain coming from his shoulder. Yang Si could not help but curse in his heart again. Jiang Nongqin said to the female soldier coldly, "Apply medicine to the military counselor to stop the bleeding. Don't leave any hidden dangers." Due to the years of war, the surgical skills of the medics were improving day by day. Now they could organize a set of rough surgical manuals. Yang Si's forehead was covered in cold sweat. If he had not gritted his teeth and persevered, he might have fainted from the pain. "Officer Jiang, you're a girl after all. Can you be gentle occasionally?" Yang Si could not help but complain. In the end, Jiang Pingji rolled her eyes coldly. There is no distinction between men and women on the battlefield in the army camp. If there is, it's a brothel, she said. We female soldiers do not need such things as gentleness. Yang Si choked back his words and became more energetic. Qin Gong, who was at the side, was a little scared. He was more familiar with Yang Si and had never seen Jiang Nongqin before. At that moment, he could not interrupt. Chapter 1149. Yang Si squinted his eyes and barely saw Jiang Pingji coming against the light. He endured the pain and used his uninjured hand to prop himself up from the stone under him. Jiang Nongqin helped him up when she saw this. "Sinner Yang Si greets my lord." Yang Si took a few steps forward, but Jiang Pingji had already galloped forward. She got off the horse and lifted Yang Si up with one hand. "What do you mean by sinner?" Jiang Pingji furrowed her brows tightly. She stared at the white cloth tied around his shoulder. Because Yang Si moved a little too much, the wound that had just stopped bleeding split open again. Spots of bright red slowly seeped out and dyed the area red. Yang Si's face was pale and he said with shame, "Sinner, I misled the command and caused thousands of soldiers to lose their lives in Gushu." Jiang Pingji thought it was something serious, but he was not to be blamed for it. A fool is bound to gain something from 1,000 considerations. A wise man is bound to make a mistake from 1,000 considerations. Yang Si was a human being, not the brain of heaven. No, even the brain of heaven had made mistakes before, let alone a human being. At the end of the day, it was not Yang Si's fault. He could only blame the enemy for being better than him. He, on the other hand, obediently went to take the blame. How can there be no deaths in war? Jiang Pingji was distressed that thousands of elites had died, but it was not a reason to push the blame to others and shirk responsibility. Yang Si's lips opened and closed for a long time. His bloodshot eyes were glistening with tears, which made the bystanders feel sad. "You have tried your best to deal with the enemy and even saved most of the troops. Why should I blame you?" Jiang Pingji said helplessly, "If you feel guilty, then take good care of your injuries. You suffered a loss in Han Yu's hands this time. Next time, you will get back at him." Yang Si stopped the losses in time and saved more than 6,000 of the 10,000 elites. Most of the casualties were in Gushu Gorge. Who could say that Yang Si had done nothing wrong by being able to retreat under such circumstances? Jiang Pingji looked at Qin Gong and said, "Officer Qin was seriously injured. Why didn't you let the medical soldiers treat him?" In ancient times, the medical skills were backward. In her era, a missing arm or a broken leg could be regrown in minutes, but it was not possible here. Although Qin Gong did not lose an arm or a leg, the wounds on his body were still quite terrifying. There was even a palm-long cut on his face. Suddenly being called out by Jiang Pingji, Qin Gong came back to his senses. My lord," Qin Gong called out. His mind was still in a mess, so he suddenly became speechless and didn't know what to say. Jiang Pingji said calmly, "We'll talk about it later. Field Officer Qin, go and tend to your wounds first to prevent excessive blood loss." Qin Gong thought that he would be reprimanded like a storm, but it turned out to be a warm and caring one, scaring him into a daze. Qin Gong was used to being a capricious lord like Su Fei. He had already mentally prepared himself to be the scapegoat in 72 different ways. No matter what the reason was, it was an indisputable fact that Qin Gong had lost 40% of his troops. If the lord flew into a rage because of this and used military law to punish him, he would have no complaints. Fortunately, Jiang Pingji did not know what Qin Gong was thinking. If she did, she would have rolled her eyes. Was she the kind of lord who did not distinguish between right and wrong? My lord, let Gong Liao lead the remaining troops and evacuate first. Yang Si slowly sat back on the huge rock and secretly took a deep breath to suppress the pain of his wound. Gong Liao still doesn't know that my lord has arrived with reinforcements. Can you send a messenger to summon him back? Jiang Pingji joked, of course. Otherwise, Gong Liao will run in the wrong direction and into the enemy's lair. At that moment, Jiang Pingji sent a messenger to chase after Cheng Yuan. Cheng Yuan was a little confused at first. He grabbed the messenger and asked 3 or 4 times before he accepted the surprise. He, who was originally steady, suddenly broke down. He looked like he was crying and laughing at the same time. God bless my lord. God bless our army. After the ecstasy, Cheng Yuan asked about Yang Si and Qin Gong's situation in detail. When he learned that they were still alive, Cheng Yuan almost cried with joy. He hurriedly gathered his troops and horses and returned along the original path. When he was fleeing, his heart was as heavy as a mountain. All kinds of negative emotions weighed down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. When he went, Cheng Yuan wished he could install a pair of wind and fire wheels under his feet. He flew over with a swish. He galloped on his horse, his sleeves blowing in the wind, and the hairband that bound his hair fluttered nonstop. When he arrived with his troops, the simple and crude camp had already been set up. Pots were set up on piles of bonfires, and a variety of food was bubbling in the pots. The aroma of food drifted into everyone's nostrils, tempting their stomachs to growl like thunder. The surviving soldiers were very hungry. They didn't care that the white rice had just come out of the oven. They opened their mouths and wanted to eat it. The boiling hot rice rolled in their mouths a few times, scalding them until they shivered. Their tongues were scalded until they were red, but they couldn't bear to spit it out. Instead, they swallowed it whole. The heat rolled along their mouths and into their mouths. It was scalding, warm, and satisfying. Many people had already burst into tears. They hugged their bowls and sobbed. Some people were so anxious that they grabbed the rice with their hands. After crying for a while, they laughed. These days, they drank water to fill their stomachs and ate weeds and tree bark. They were so hungry that they could only tighten their belts. The group of people were so hungry that their eyes were glowing. Yang Si was the same, but he had encountered a rather awkward accident. His entire right arm was wrapped tightly and hung in front of his chest. It was very unnatural for him to use chopsticks with his left hand. He could still pick up the large ones if he was not awkward. However, he could not pick up the small ones no matter how hard he tried. Sigh. I hate that I'm not Zixiao. Yang Si was envious for a while and put down his chopsticks unhappily. Wei Si's left and right hands were very agile. Writing with his left hand was comparable to using his right hand. When handling official documents, he also used both hands at the same time. Such a unique skill could not be learned by ordinary people. As he was thinking, a wooden spoon appeared in front of him. Thank you, Colonel Jiang. Yang Si was somewhat flattered. This female colonel was usually very cold. Apart from his lord, there was no one else in her eyes. Yang Si had never dared to provoke such a person. For her to condescend to give him a spoon, it was as if the sun had risen from the west. You're welcome. It's not convenient for the military counselor to use chopsticks. I'm afraid that I'll be disrespectful in front of the Lord. Yang Si was speechless. The sun still rose from the east today. This unapproachable colonel could not stop talking about the Lord. Yang Si could not help but mutter. Jiang Nongqin, who had sharp ears, could faintly hear her own name. Military counselor? Yang Si coughed softly. He scooped up the spoon and ate his meal, avoiding Jiang Nongqin. However, Jiang Pengji heard what Yang Si said. She glanced at Jiang Nongqin. Her face was as calm as a mountain, but she secretly thought to herself. While Jiang Pingji was eating, the frightened audience quietly poked their heads out. Finally, a few sporadic bullet screens appeared on the blank screen. Xianxia, excuse me, can I send bullet screens now? Naji, should be able to? The audience from the two dimensions cried like a storm in their hearts. Even though they were separated by a dimension, the murderous aura made them tremble. Chapter 1150. The little princess in the livestream room was shocked. Some of the old fans in the live broadcast room could not take it anymore, let alone the newcomers. Ping Qiu, I'm a newbie in the live streaming room. This is the first time I've gotten a spot. In the past, he had always heard people say that Jiang Bapi had an aura of 2.8 meters and that even the king of hell would be afraid of him when he glared at him. At that time, he had thought that it was a sensational story. No matter how strong the aura is, can it be stronger than my Jiang? Now that I've seen it for myself, it really lives up to its name. My Jiang was instantly crushed. The QAQ streamer's aura is more than 2.8 meters, it's clearly the distance between two dimensions. Zhu Xiao, you're Jiang? Oh, the popular actress who imitates the streamer's character and keeps on King the Queen? Duanlu, Tisk, that Xiao Hua who changed her name to Pengzi streamer. Let's not talk about her. My streamer always likes to speak with facts. She won't use tricks like drinking, eating, and sleeping with people to get ahead. There were so many problems in the entertainment industry. There would always be people who did not learn their lessons. Jiang Pingji's streaming room had been around for many years, and its popularity was always at the top of the charts. In the early years, many newcomers in the entertainment industry would copy the characters in the live broadcast room and rely on that to become popular. However, setting up a person's persona was not something that could be easily messed up. Not to mention, there was still the main body in front of him. Even so, there were still many people who chose this path in order to take a shortcut. As the lord with the most fans in the streaming room, Jiang Pingji naturally had the most fans. However, her fan group was toxic. There were too many big shots from all walks of life. Many young stars who imitated Jiang Pingji's persona were defeated by them. As time passed, the newcomers didn't dare to do it again. Yu Yanling, what? Which unsightly flower came out to blackmail the host again? Can you imitate the host's aura? Xinhua, I'm going to beat it up. With these topics, the audience's taut nerves finally relaxed. Seeing that the limelight had passed, the audience slowly returned to the joking atmosphere from before. There were too many topics for them to talk about, and they had been holding it in just now. If it wasn't for the tense atmosphere, they would have flooded the screen with bullet screens. Women's harms. Qin Gong, let me hug you and comfort you. Even if you're disfigured, you're still the fattest. Blooming thorns. Qin Gong's wound is very dangerous. If it was a little more to the side, he might be the next Xiahou Dun. Because of Xie Zhe's arrow, Qin Gong was injured by a stray arrow, and a palm-sized wound appeared on his face. The wound was a little deep and could easily leave a scar. However, Qin Gong did not mind. He was a man and a general at that. Scars were the best medals. Wukong Daodu, I even asked for a protective talisman for Rongrong. Sure enough, a scourge lives for 1,000 years. The host has come at the right time. Huan Sun Fangchao de Gui Qi, sigh, it's not exactly in time. If it was a few hours earlier, more than 3,000 casualties could have been avoided. Speaking of the tragic battle in the Lonely Hill Canyon, the hearts of the spectators became much heavier. Jiang Pingji was a qualified streamer. She streamed live every day. Her influence and her team were built up through the eyes of the audience. They put themselves in Jiang Pingji's shoes, and the soldiers were their blood and sweat. With so many casualties, how could he not feel heartache? However, as Jiang Pingji had said, how could there be no deaths in war? They only hoped that the chaotic world would end soon, so that they could happily accompany Jiang Pingji to watch the show. Jiang Pingji's originally relaxed mood suddenly sank a little when she saw the bullet screen. Yang Si called himself a sinner. He did not know that Jiang Pingji also blamed herself, but she did not show it. She felt a little sad emotionally, but her rationality told her that the soldiers had died for a reason. Their deaths had brought about the situation that Jiang Pingji wanted the most. Perhaps she had been assimilated into the ancient times. If it was her in the past, she would not even bat an eyelid. She finished eating without changing her expression. Jiang Pingji glanced at a few bullet screen comments. Xiaoshui Wushuang, let me ask you weakly. Didn't you notice that the host's weapon is a little strange? Lao Ciji Lianmeng, it's indeed very strange. The style of the knife is somewhat like a tang knife. I can't tell the material, but its hardness is definitely more terrifying than the well-tempered steel that we know. I just went to the Tieba forum and found the recording of today's stream. I dragged it back to watch it and found a very shocking fact. The host used her knife to easily cut through several tiger-headed bronze shields. Needless to say, she cut through several people's bodies with one knife. We can't even achieve this level of knife craftsmanship in our era. Do you think the host can do it in this era? The onlookers saw that Jiang Pingji was unstoppable. Apart from double-clicking 666, she basically did nothing else. Those big shots were different. Their focus was different from ordinary people. The knife in Jiang Pingji's hand was obviously unusually strong. Wu Yue Shue, could it be alien technology? Tangerine soft candy, maybe it was made by a cultivator? Shumoning, could it be that a super powerful person saw that the host needed to change her knife every time she fought and couldn't help but mail her one? The onlookers used their own black holes of imagination. Some people integrated their imaginations into a story with a beginning and an end. Sang K, maybe the host has a super terrifying backer. This backer is a super powerful person from the cultivation world. He pitted the host for having to change her weapon every time she fought, so he couldn't help but use alien technology to make a plug-in weapon for her? Jiang Pingji looked coldly at the onlookers as they let their imaginations run wild. She thought that it was scary enough that Wei Ci guessed that she was a man in her previous life, until she met the onlookers in the streaming room. She was still too young. However, the origin of the God Slayer was indeed a mystery. She didn't want to explain it, so she let them make wild guesses. The name list of those who died in the war must be sorted out as soon as possible. Add another layer of compensation. Jiang Pingji paused and added, they died for me. I can't just leave their corpses in a foreign land. Collect their corpses properly tomorrow. This matter cannot be neglected. Everyone responded. Jiang Pingji continued, Jing Rong, it's been hard on you these days. More than 10,000 troops had penetrated deep into the enemy's territory. It was already a great achievement for Yang Si to react quickly and preserve most of his troops. More importantly, they now had sufficient reason to attack Su Pei. She would repay him tenfold in the future for how many of her soldiers were injured by Su Pei today. Little did she know that Su Pei was sitting on pins and needles. While Jiang Pingji was reorganizing her troops, Han Yu led his troops back to Shanwu City. Su Pei thought that Han Yu would return in 1 or 2 days. He didn't expect that he would be delayed for so long. In the end, he didn't get what he wanted. They didn't manage to wipe out the enemy. There was a gap between reality and his imagination. Su Pei was in a bad mood, but he didn't show it on his face. Not only did he not blame Han Yu and Xie Zhe, but he also rewarded them greatly and organized a banquet for them. Han Yu had something he wanted to say to Su Pei, but there were too many people around. He could only restrain himself. Halfway through the banquet, Su Pei got up to change his clothes. After changing, Su Pei prepared to return to the banquet. My lord, I am the assistant general under Captain Xie's command. I have an important matter to report to my lord. Su Pei frowned. When he heard the identity of the person, he waved his hand to dismiss the guards and called the assistant general forward. What is it that you can't say at the banquet? Why must you talk about it in private? Chapter 1151. Su Bei's indifferent attitude changed upon hearing this. His face darkened and his eyes darkened. A mere deputy general dared to insult Han Yu in front of him. Who gave him the courage? Su Bei thought to himself, but his expression did not change. He said, Wenbin has always been generous. Why would he bear a grudge? If what you say is reasonable, he will accept it humbly. These were Su Bei's heartfelt words. Although Han Yu was stubborn and occasionally offended him, he was truly loyal to him. Who wouldn't like a loyal remonstrant who had never formed a clique? The deputy general's heart skipped a beat. Su Bei's words clearly showed that he trusted Han Yu. He had taken the risk to snitch to Su Bei. This action had offended Han Yu to the core. If even the Lord did not believe him, wouldn't he be ruining his future? Now that the arrow was knocked on the bowstring, it had to be released. His back was drenched in sweat as he braced himself and revealed everything he knew. The deputy general said, I know I am guilty. It is unbecoming of a gentleman to talk behind someone's back. However, military advisor Han monopolizes military power and is arrogant. He has changed military orders several times, causing delays in battle. Now, he is even shamelessly claiming credit and deceiving the Lord. How can I betray my loyalty and pretend not to know? Su Bei was suspicious when he heard this. Although Han Yu had a straightforward personality and offended people easily, none of the civil and military officials in the tent had ever criticized Han Yu in this aspect. At most, they would say that Han Yu had a bad temper and was overbearing. However, this was not a major problem. What do you mean by that? If there is no evidence, then this is a false accusation. Su Bei's voice deepened. His eyes carried a hint of fierceness as he stared at the deputy general. The deputy general steeled his heart and said, Military advisor Han let Lu Shi go. Isn't this a major crime? Su Bei almost choked on his own saliva. He could not be blamed for losing his composure. The deputy general's words were too shocking. What did he mean by, Han Yu let Lu Shi go? Lu Shi was in the midst of an army of tens of thousands. How could Han Yu let her go? Tell me in detail. What exactly happened? The deputy general had already taken a gamble. He had already prepared for the worst. He did not expect Su Bei to not blame him and instead ask him about it. Seeing this, the deputy general knew that there was hope. He said, although military advisor Han has some weapons, the commander of the entire army is Commandant Xie. The deputy general was about to say that Han Yu was bossing Xie around, monopolizing military power, and complaining about the injustice done to his own general. However, Su Bei was not in the mood to listen. Tell me why Wenbin let Lu Shi go first. Put the rest aside for now. The deputy general felt wronged and swallowed the rest of the words back into his stomach. He said concisely, Yang Si and the others should have been buried in Gushu. Unexpectedly, military counselor Han made a mistake in his command, giving the thieves a chance to linger on. After that, their reinforcements arrived, and General Han retreated without a fight. If that's the case, I have the right to act as the military advisor when he saw that the situation wasn't looking good and promptly stopped the losses. But the military advisor had already recognized that the leader of the reinforcements was Lu Shi. Su Bei felt that this was a joke. Lu Shi had personally led troops and rushed over from afar to save Yang Si and the others? This must be fake, right? This was what Su Bei was thinking, but the deputy general's expression was not fake. For a moment, his heart wavered. Lu Shi's martial prowess is indeed extraordinary, and her temperament is restless. It is possible that she will personally take action. The deputy general could not help but interrupt Su Bei's words. He said, Lu Shi's reinforcements are less than 3,000, and the remnants of Yang Si and the others have either escaped or are injured. Our army still has 20,000 troops. Why can't we fight? Without thinking, military counselor Han changed the military order and forced Colonel Xie to order a retreat. My lord, military counselor Han has missed a great opportunity. His intentions are unforgivable. If we can exchange for Lu Shi's head, I believe that these 20,000 soldiers will definitely not feel pity for themselves. For my lord, even if they have to sacrifice their lives, they will let Lu Shi stay. But military counselor Han ordered a retreat. At this point, the deputy general felt wronged and his eyes reddened. He was truly loyal to Su Bei and Xie. If he could exchange 20,000 lives for Jiang Pingji's head, he was willing to do it. because he was very clear that if he did not do it now, he would have to pay with even more casualties in the future. Su Bei looked calm on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. He said to the deputy general, "Tell me everything you know. Don't hide anything." The deputy general was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Yes." Su Bei took a long time to change his clothes this time. Han Yu was worried that he had met with an accident and became the second Wumashang. He was about to send someone to ask when Su Bei rushed back. By then, the banquet was more than half over. Everyone had drunk 3 rounds of wine and was tipsy. Han Yu noticed that Su Bei's face was a little gloomy. He thought to himself, "Is there any bad news?" Thinking about the current situation, Han Yu frowned deeply. Worry was written all over his face. "Wenbin, are you troubled by something?" Qing Yuan looked away from the performance and turned his gaze to Han Yu, who was not in the right mood. During the period when Han Yu had led the troops to pursue Yang Si, Su Bei had put Qing Yuan in an important position. Therefore, Qing Yuan's seat at the banquet was closer to the front. It's just a few matters. The banquet was not a place to discuss matters. Han Yu could only vaguely refer to it. Qing Yuan understood, but he believed in his lord's strength. She might not lose to Jiang Pingji. How can Lu Shi and his kind be mentioned in the same breath as my lord? Even if they have a moment of glory, in the end, they will be like a shooting star in the night sky, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Just like her humble family, which had no foundation, they would eventually be annihilated along with the chaos of the world. Han Yu did not comment. He was too lazy to correct Qing Yuan's stubborn thoughts. While Qing Yuan was frantically cheering for his lord, Su Bei's gaze wandered to Han Yu. A strange look flashed in his eyes. He trusted Han Yu, but the deputy general's words made him feel very uncomfortable. Han Yu had 20,000 troops under his command. How could he not defeat a few thousand defeated soldiers? Knowing that the enemy's vassals were right in front of their formation, Han Yu did not think about killing them. Instead, he gave such a ridiculous order to retreat. Su Bei knew how terrifying Jiang Pingji's combat power was, but it was difficult for one person to fight against 4/5 of a group. No matter how powerful a person was, an army of 20,000 using the tactic of head-on fighting against him would always be able to kill him. As long as Jiang Pingji could die, so what if the 20,000 soldiers were sacrificed? To put it more bluntly, so what if Han Yu himself was sacrificed? Was it not worth it? Jiang Pingji was still single. She did not have any heirs to carry on her will. If she died, the forces in Wanzhou that had gathered together because of her would collapse. Even if Lu Shi was still around, he had retired for many years and had long stopped caring about the affairs of the world. Even if he came back, what use would he be? Why did Han Yu let go of such a good opportunity? Su Bei had also thought about it. Perhaps Han Yu had his own considerations. But could these considerations be worth the lives of the enemy's vassals? After the banquet, Han Yu went to see Su Bei in private. Han Yu wanted to talk about this matter. As a member of the aristocratic family, Su Bei did not show any signs of dissatisfaction on the surface, even though he was dissatisfied. Chapter 1152. Su Bei had intended to use the art of checks and balances to promote others to divide the power in Han Yu's hands. Han Yu had no objection to this. After all, extreme prosperity leads to decline. If he was placed in too much of an important position, Su Bei would question and be wary of him sooner or later. On the other hand, this could also provide opportunities for talented people to cultivate more useful people for the Lord. The prosperity of a force couldn't depend on one person. It needed 100 flowers to bloom together. Han Yu wasn't an autocratic person. Su Bei intended to check and balance the power, so he took the opportunity to give others opportunities. It was the best of both worlds. Late one night, an unexpected person climbed over the wall of his house. Han Yu looked at Xie Zhe, who was dressed in black, speechless. Why couldn't you talk about it during the day in the government office? Why did you have to climb over his wall in the middle of the night? He tightened the cloak on his shoulders with a bronze lamp in his right hand. Han Yu changed his clothes and returned to his room in the middle of the night. He was almost scared to death when he saw a dark shadow squatting outside his door. What is Commandant Xie doing? Han Yu smiled bitterly. If it weren't for the fact that he had a good personal relationship with Xie, he would have called the guards to beat Xie out of the room. While observing Xie's hesitant expression, he raised his hand and pushed the door open. He couldn't help but laugh. "Commandant Xie, you'd better go inside and talk. If the night patrol sees us, I don't know what kind of rumors will spread the next day." Han Yu lit up the lamp. The room was brighter under the illumination of the lamp. Xie followed him into the room. Han Yu teased him when he saw that he didn't speak. "All the soldiers in the army say that Commandant Xie is an upright man. Who would have thought that you have the hobby of a gentleman on a beam? Climbing over someone's wall in the middle of the night?" Xie's cheeks turned red from the teasing and he stuttered. He didn't know what to say. In the end, he knelt down and apologized. Han Yu was shocked and quickly helped him up. "Commandant Xie, please get up. What are you doing?" Xie said, "Military counselor, I didn't manage properly. I let the assistant general take advantage of the loophole and slandered the Lord." Han Yu was confused. "Why did you say that?" Xie was so ashamed that he refused to get up. He stammered out the whole story. Xie wouldn't have known that his deputy had stabbed Han Yu in the back, if it wasn't for the fact that his deputy had spilled the beans and badmouthed Han Yu in front of him. Every word that the deputy general had said to Su Bei had pierced through his heart. Xie suddenly understood when he thought of his lord's attitude toward Han Yu. This was not the tacit understanding between the lord and Han Yu at all. It was obvious that the lord was really dissatisfied. She might even be suspicious. As Xie continued, the smile on Han Yu's face gradually faded away. What was left was a chilling coldness. There seemed to be an undercurrent of coldness in his eyes. "Counselor," Xie was interrupted by Han Yu. "Forget it, I already know about this matter. Thank you for coming so late at night to inform me." Han Yu's voice wasn't as clear and bright as usual. Instead, it carried a chill that made people's hair stand on end. He seemed to be brewing something. Xie opened his mouth, unable to utter a single word. Han Yu paused and said, "I plan to stay at home for a few days. I won't be seeing any guests. If there's nothing important, please don't come to visit." Xie was the most important general under Su Bei's command. He held military power in his hands. If he got too close to Han Yu, neither of them would be in a good position. Han Yu lowered his eyelids to hide the thoughts in his eyes. Xie couldn't help but want to put in a good word for Su Bei to ease the tense relationship between Su Bei and Han Yu. Before he could open his mouth, Han Yu laughed and said, "You don't have to be so cautious, Lieutenant Xie. I know what I'm doing." Su Bei was the lord that he had personally chosen. How could he be disappointed in Su Bei just because of a moment of suspicion? It would be abnormal if there were no stumbles between the lord and his subordinate. After Xie left, the smile on Han Yu's face returned to normal. He sat in front of the table and watched the flickering candlelight. There was an undercurrent in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long while, Han Yu let out a long sigh, blew out the candlelight, and went to sleep. Now that the great battle was imminent, no matter how afraid Su Bei was, he would not truly touch him. He could use this time to dispel his opponent's worries. Jiang Pengji led the troops to rush to Yang Xi's aid. Within a few days, the main army also hurried over and successfully joined forces with Jiang Pengji. Yang Xi, who was holed up in the tent, heard that the army had arrived. He hurriedly kicked away the thin blanket covering his body and angrily looked for Qiguan Rang to settle the score. Since his martial strength was not enough, he called Qin Gong over. Qin Gong was also an injured soldier, but he practiced martial arts all year round and had a strong body. His injuries were heavier than Yang Xi's, but he recovered much faster than Yang Xi. Advisor Yang, wait a moment. Where are you going?" Yang Xi stopped in his tracks and said with a fierce expression, "Of course I'm looking for the culprit, the one who put us in such a difficult situation." Qiguan Rang's declaration of war had really screwed him over. If not for his lord's timely arrival, he would have already gone to the King of Hell, drank Granny Meng's soup, and crossed the bridge of helplessness. The corpse was cold. Qin Gong was still a newbie, and the forces of Wanzhou were unfamiliar to him. Who gave him the courage to diss the elders before even bowing to them? Was it Xianxia? Isn't this very offensive? So be it, Xianxia said, feeling wronged. I almost lost my life. Isn't this even more aggrieved? But advisor. Qin Gong was dragged away by Xianxia. The patrolling soldiers saw the way the two of them were tugging at each other, and it attracted countless strange looks. The newbie Qin Gong was thin-skinned, and he quickly blushed. If the Lord finds out, what should we do? Picking a fight for no reason and violating military discipline? Be careful that the Lord makes life difficult for him. Xianxia said, if the Lord finds out, then so be it. According to her temperament, it's good enough that she didn't add fuel to the fire. Qin Gong was speechless. He slandered the Lord behind her back and still acted very sloppy and normal. Such a non-mainstream relationship between the Lord and his minister was really an eye-opener for him. Xianxia said he would go to the door. He asked where Qiguan Rang's tent was and directly pulled Qin Gong over. Before entering the tent, he smelled the aroma of food. He opened the tent and happened to hear Qiguan Rang and Wei Ci chatting and laughing. Look, they're here. Qin Gong was speechless. Qiguan Rang and Wei Ci looked at the two people outside the tent. Seeing them enter, the former got up and bowed deeply to them. Xianxia saw this ostentatious display and felt very upset. Qiguan Rang had taken the initiative to apologize and admit defeat. He felt that his fist had landed on cotton, and all his grievances had dissipated. He simply gave himself a way out and said, I heard that when Zheng is holding a banquet. Can we welcome a couple of uninvited guests? Qiguan Rang smiled and said, You're most welcome. Qin Gong looked left and right, still a little confused. He really couldn't understand the tricks of the literati group. Xianxia held a soup spoon in his left hand and ate. Qin Gong also ate a meal. Wei Ci saw that he was frowning deeply, as if troubled by something. He asked with a smile, What is Feng Jing worried about? Qin Gong saw that the person who asked was Wei Ci, a man who was more beautiful than a woman. He immediately blushed and casually made an excuse. It's nothing much, I'm just wondering. The march is tough, and this dish looks, smells, and tastes good. I wonder how military advisor Qiguan prepared it? Wei Ci smiled and said, In order to make amends to Jing Rong, when Jing secretly promised me many good things. Qin Gong was speechless. Chapter 1153. Jiang Pingji heard about Qiguan Rang inviting Xianxia to a banquet to make amends. As the Lord, she had yet to say anything, but the audience had already excitedly opened their bets. Long Shui Shijiang. Qiguan Rang wants to bribe little Rongrong with just one meal? Naive, childish, and overestimating himself. At least 2 meals. Nianzuo Zuzidi, little Rongrong almost lost her life this time. 1 meal is definitely not enough. Yusheng Fan, the people above are all salted fish. No matter what, Xianxia is still a strategist. Have you ever seen a strategist change his stance for food? Some of the audience happily joined in the fun, while others were more realistic. Whether it was Xianxia or Qiguan Rang, they were both intelligent white and black people, not kindergarten kids. When kindergarten kids had a conflict, a lollipop could reconcile, and a big meal could make them as close as wearing a pair of pants. These 2 white and black people had a conflict. Who knows, they might be at each other's throats from now on. Of course, this was not what worried them the most. They were most worried that Qiguan Rang and Xianxia's discord would cause internal divisions in Wanzhou. The audience raised their heads in anticipation, eager to know the final outcome. Jiang Pingji was also quite curious. I heard that Wenjing asked Zixiao to cook yesterday? Jiang Pingji said with a smile, Zixiao's cooking skills are excellent. Jing Rong got lucky. Qiguan Rang waved his feather fan lightly. When he heard Jiang Pingji mention yesterday's incident, his calm eyes stirred up some waves. Zixiao's cooking skills are indeed good. Even the royal chef is slightly inferior. If Jing Rong knew that the person who cooked was Zixiao, I'm afraid she would stick to him. As they spoke, Jiang Pingji saw a bullet screen. Langan Babeo Kanji, didn't the ancients say that a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen? Even if Zixiao's cooking skills are really good, isn't it a deliberate provocation for Qiguan Rang to ask Zixiao to cook? He felt a little uncomfortable at the thought. It was as if Qiguan Rang was using Zixiao as a cook. According to the audience's understanding, Qiguan Rang's actions were inappropriate. However, he had really wronged Qiguan Rang. In Yuejizuga Qin Ma, what does a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen have to do with cooking? If you want to say that it sounds hypocritical, I can understand. These words came from the Mencius. The original sentence was, "A gentleman is like a beast. When he sees it alive, he cannot bear to see it die. When he hears its sound, he cannot bear to eat its flesh. This is why a gentleman keeps his distance from the kitchen." In layman's terms, not entering the kitchen was because one did not want to hear the screams of livestock. This was because one would not have the heart to eat or kill. It was not to say that a gentleman should not cook. However, with the evolution of society, many words have been deliberately twisted. For example, a woman's virtue is to have no talent. The original meaning has been twisted to the point that even his mother wouldn't recognize it. Be it a gentleman or a villain, they all had to eat. Otherwise, they would have starved to death. Qiguan Rang privately asked Wei Ci, who had excellent culinary skills, to help him. He did not mean to look down on him. If it was really a humiliation, would Wei Ci foolishly agree? Qiguan Rang did not know about the existence of the bullet screen and said, "My lord's prediction is correct. Zixiao has been entangled." Jiang Pingji imagined the scene of Yang Si surrounding and intercepting Wei Ci in her mind. She could not help but laugh involuntarily. After a moment of silence, Jiang Pingji suddenly opened her mouth. "The blame for this disaster lies on me. This time, Wenjing has been wronged. You have to take the blame for me." Jiang Pingji had asked for the declaration of war. Qiguan Rang had merely obeyed her orders. If one wanted to nitpick, the most one could say was that Qiguan Rang's declaration of war was too hurtful, causing Su Bei to fly into a rage out of humiliation. In this matter, Jiang Pingji and Yang Si each had 50% of the responsibility. Qiguan Rang was merely an innocent bystander. He did not do anything wrong, but he had to bear Yang Si's wrath. From Qiguan Rang's perspective, he felt rather wronged. If Qiguan Rang and Yang Si quarreled, Jiang Pingji would not blame them. She decisively admitted her mistake, causing Qiguan Rang to look at her in astonishment. According to the mainstream thinking of the ancient times, it was impossible for the Lord to be wrong. The only ones who were wrong were the officials. Taking Jiang Pingji's case as an example, she felt that she was wrong. However, from the perspective of Qiguan Rang and the others, this was not the case. As the conspirators, they did not discover the hidden dangers. They did not advise the Lord in time, causing her to make a mistake. Hence, the responsibility was on them. This logic was unreasonable in Jiang Pingji's eyes, but the others did not find anything wrong with it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Do I look like the kind of person who will not admit to my crimes? Jiang Pingji teased him with a smile. She and Qiguan Rang were not only the Lord's officials but also good friends. They were quite casual when it did not involve official matters. She did not put on airs. "Do you want me to cook a meal for you personally?" Qiguan Rang lowered his eyelids and said faintly, "My lord said that she was wrong, but I am innocent. Why do you have to punish me?" Jiang Pingji did not react for a moment. She only reacted after a while. Qiguan Rang was mocking her for her poor cooking skills. Eating the food she cooked was like being punished. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Their friendship was over. The reaction of the audience in the streaming room was even more unbridled. They changed their ways to ridicule Qiguan Rang. At the same time, they called Qiguan Rang like crazy. These days, it was rare to see a subordinate who dared to directly contradict his own boss. Tudu Feiqiu, Boss Qiguan does not have a strong presence, but he is a boss. His EQ is high. Lao Ciji Lianmeng, not only does Boss Qiguan have a high EQ, but he is also truly loyal to the streamer. If this happened to me, I would definitely be angry. Yang Si did not look for the culprit but attacked me instead. I am not going to take the blame for this. Once things get out of hand, It will not just be a conflict between two strategists. It will even shake the streamer's power. For example, choosing sides, forming cliques, and so on. Boss Qiguan Rang must have known about this situation, so he took the initiative to take a step back. Yang Si also knew when to stop. Both of them took a step back. The world was clear. Everyone understood this simple logic. Which of the strategists was not a shrewd person? But it was not easy to take a step back. This concerned one's face and dignity. Many people knew that it was wrong to do so, but they would often be aggressive for their own interests. For the sake of the overall situation and internal harmony, Qiguan Rang decisively took a step back. From this, one could see his breadth of mind and foresight. The crisis that could have caused a conflict disappeared just like that. Only one person was very frustrated. Wei Ci was targeted by Yang Si. In order to avoid this glutton, Wei Ci could only escape to Jiang Pingji's place to hide. Such a glutton, sooner or later he will fall because of this. Jiang Pingji commented. Ever since Yang Si entered her camp, she had often commented on him like this. Wei Ci said, "Isn't that so? He doesn't learn his lesson in 2 lifetimes." Fortunately, Jiang Pingji had already turned off the streaming room. Otherwise, Wei Ci's words would have blown up the audience. Jiang Pingji had a smile in her eyes. She asked casually, "Why? Jing Rong has fallen because of this before?" Chapter 1154. Zuda? Jiang Pingji searched in her mind before she could match the person. "The Zuda you mentioned, is it Tang Yao?" Jiang Pingji was not very interested in Wei Ci's past life. She rarely took the initiative to ask about it, unless she was bored and wanted to listen to stories to kill time. Tang Yao and Jing Rong don't seem to have any interactions? Why are they fighting each other? In their previous lives, Zuda and Jing Rong were both Huang Song officials. Zuda was born in an aristocratic family, so he attached great importance to his family status. Jing Rong was born in a poor family, but Huang Song put her in an important position. Of course, the two of them didn't get along. The discord between them ran deep. Wei Ci knew Jiang Pingji's temperament. Telling her these things would not affect her trust in Yang Si. Her Majesty took the initiative to befriend Jing Rong and frequently gifted her with delicious food and delicacies. At first, it was nothing, but as time went on, Yang Si and Huang Song grew apart. After that, he used several successive stratagems to sow discord. Jing Rong had no choice but to seek refuge with His Majesty. Yang Si did not jump ship because of his gluttony, but the cause of his jump ship was indeed because of his gluttony. In his previous life, if it weren't for Tang Yao's godly assistance, the possibility of Yang Si taking the initiative to jump ship wasn't high. Jiang Pingji listened with great interest. She did not forget to mock him. "I'm afraid that Jing Rong is going to regret his actions. If it's recorded in the history books, the future generations will know that he made a mistake because of his gluttony." This reason was really shameful. She could totally imagine what the students of later generations would call Yang Si, foodie. Wei Ci pursed his lips and smiled. Wasn't that right? In his previous life, Yang Si had often hugged him and poured out his grievances. This dark history was simply an unspeakable pain in life. Jiang Pingji asked again, "What about Tang Yao?" Wei Ci lowered his eyelids and said lightly, "After Huang Song was defeated, he committed suicide." He wasn't lying, but he wasn't completely lying either. Under Huang Song's command, Tang Yao often gave Yang Si a hard time. The two of them were always at loggerheads with each other. Tang Yao even used the excuse of being drunk to point at the mulberry tree and scold the locust tree that Yang Si was the son of a prostitute. Yang Si endured the humiliation. Later, when Huang Song was defeated, he returned the humiliation to Tang Yao. In the end, Tang Yao could not bear the humiliation and was forced by Yang Si to commit suicide by hitting the wall. It couldn't be said that Yang Si was wrong in this matter, but his means of revenge were indeed somewhat vicious. Wei Ci did not want his lord to be dissatisfied with Yang Si because of this. Jiang Pingji did not question further. Tang Yao should be compiling books with Master Yuan Jing now, right? Wei Ci said, "This is more suitable for him." It's also safe for him. The world was in chaos and the feudal lords were in internal strife. It was either you die or I live. With Tang Yao's temperament he would be fine under any lord, but he was indeed not suitable for Jiang Pingji. The pride of an aristocratic family had long since melted into his bones and was deeply rooted. It wasn't something that could be corrected with just a few words. Rather than letting him come into contact with power and provoke discord among the forces in Wanzhou, it was better to let him make the best use of him and follow the teacher in writing books. Not to mention anything else, Tang Yao's knowledge and literary talent were truly impeccable. You're right. Writing books is more suitable for him. Jiang Pingji furrowed her brows. She was short of manpower at the moment, but she would rather have none than have a substandard one. Tang Yao was indeed talented, but he was indeed not suitable for her at the moment. He won't quit while he's ahead like Jing Rong, and he won't take the initiative to give in like Wen Zheng. The biggest possibility was that he would argue for what was right and put everyone on the spot. Jiang Pingji and Su Bei had completely shed all pretense of cordiality. After Gu Su Gorge, she had Qiguan Rang write a declaration of war. The previous declaration of war was a public condemnation, but this one was an official declaration of war. When Su Bei received the declaration of war, he flew into a rage. He immediately sent someone to write a declaration of war to scold them. It was a joyous scolding battle. As the conflict of public opinion escalated, the smell of gunpowder between the two parties became more and more intense. Su Bei followed Han Yu's previous suggestion and mobilized his troops in preparation for war. Jiang Pingji was not to be outdone. She occupied the Sichuan plains to train her troops, and at the same time, she ordered the rear to transport more weapons and rations. At this juncture, Su Bei played a trick in private. He sent a messenger to Huang Song's side to persuade him, preparing to form an alliance with Huang Song to resist Jiang Pingji. This suggestion was jointly proposed by Han Yu and Cheng Sun. The officials in the tent all agreed. Although they didn't want to admit it, compared to Jiang Pingji, Su Bei's military strength was indeed inferior. Everyone knew that once Su Bei fell, Jiang Pingji's next target would be Huang Song. The two of them had a mutually dependent relationship. No matter what schemes Huang Song had in mind, he couldn't remain indifferent. Huang Song quickly replied and formed an alliance in private. To express his sincerity, Huang Song even sent a very special woman to Su Bei. Su Bei was speechless. Did he seem like such a lecherous person? Su Bei was born in the Su family. What kind of woman couldn't he get? Why did he have to play with a married woman? Yes, Huang Song had sent him a woman who had turned over a new leaf. This woman had married 4 husbands and caused the death of 4 of them. When Su Bei heard about this, he was so angry that he almost exploded. Was Huang Song trying to form an alliance, or was he playing a prank on him? Until he read Huang Song's reply. Is this true? Su Bei furrowed his brows. Can we really use this woman to drive a wedge between Yang Si and Lu Shi? The skinny woman knelt on the ground. Beside her knelt a thin and weak little boy. According to Huang Song's letter, this woman had a history with Yang Si. The little boy beside her was Yang Si's only child. In the Battle of Tsang Prefecture, Jiang Pingji and Huang Song had peacefully divided the 2 counties of Tsang Prefecture and Qinzhou. The 2 counties of Tsang Prefecture belonged to Jiang Pingji, while Qinzhou belonged to Huang Song. Qinzhou happened to be Yang Si's hometown. Not long ago, this woman had been arrested by her neighbors and sent to the magistrate's office for killing her husband. According to the law, she should have been beheaded in public. However, she mentioned Yang Si, and this case was handed over to Huang Song. After a round of investigation and interrogation, the woman confessed that she and Yang Si had a past when they were young. Huang Song had been tricked by Yang Si so many times that he hated him to the core. When he heard the woman's words, he immediately paid attention and sent people to investigate. Yang Si's hometown was in Qinzhou's Jiangding County. This matched the woman's testimony. What they found later also matched the woman's testimony. This woman had killed her 4th husband because he had beaten her son. Huang Song's intuition told him that he could make a fuss about this. However, he didn't dare to agree with Yang Si's taste. Yang Si was the son of a prostitute, Yet he had impregnated another prostitute and had given birth to a son. He, Huang Song said to the woman, I heard that Jing Rong is still unmarried and has a very pitiful life. He will definitely bring you and your daughter back and treat you well. The woman shrunk her shoulders and hung her head low. She looked timid, but when she heard Huang Song's words, her eyes lit up. Her eyes were filled with greed. Huang Song was very satisfied. He handed the woman and the child over to Su Bei's messenger. How Su Bei operated was none of his business. Yang Si used his own experience to illustrate a saying. A man sits in his tent, and a pot falls from the sky. When the two armies started the war, they first probed the enemy on a small scale. Jiang Pingji ordered Qin Gong and Yang Si to lead 20,000 troops to Longshui in Shanghai County. This was the place where Sichuan Plain and Shanweng Town bordered each other. They would hold back a portion of Su Bei's troops. Another 30,000 troops were dispatched to launch a probing attack on Jia County to find out the enemy's strength. The remaining troops were to stay behind and wait for the situation to change. Chapter 1155. I'm afraid it's a Hongmen banquet. Qin Gong also read the contents of the invitation and subconsciously furrowed his brows. When the two armies were at war, if Yang Si got close to the enemy, it would arouse the suspicions of the higher-ups. Such a simple and crude method of sowing discord seemed simple and crude, but it often achieved unexpected results. Unfortunately, his lord was not a fool. She would never be led by the nose by others. If she had such an idea, she would be really stupid. Yang Si closed the invitation and sneered. So what if it's a Hongmen banquet? I'm just a small military advisor. I can't control the situation. If it really was a Hongmen banquet, it should be directed at the Lord. Yang Si was making a mountain out of a molehill. Qin Gong choked and said hesitantly, but the Lord's eyes are clear and her heart is clear. Ordinary tricks won't work on her. I'm a little curious. Why did Su Bei and his gang suddenly do this? Yang Si was not worried at all. He had followed Jiang Pingji for many years. He still had this bit of trust. I want to go and take a look. When Qin Gong heard this, he slowly swallowed his words of persuasion. Since the military advisor knew what to do, he was relieved. However, before the military advisor goes, why don't you inform the Lord first? If you go without permission, I'm afraid they'll use this to make a fuss. Qin Gong was very young, but with Su Fei as his former master, he was also trained to be cautious. He felt more stable than Yang Si. After Yang Si heard this, he pursed his lips and laughed. He gently knocked the rolled invitation on the table, making a melodious sound. Officer Qin's words make sense. Yang Si considered himself a nobody, but he had attracted a lot of hatred. There was no guarantee that someone would take the opportunity to harm him. For this Hongmen banquet, he had to bring some people along to boost his courage and add some bargaining chips to his life. There were still 2 days before the banquet. Yang Si mentioned this matter to Jiang Pingji, and she rolled her eyes at him. Aren't you afraid that they'll poison you to death during the banquet? Jiang Pingji frowned at her family's advisor. She felt that her family was poisonous. Apart from a few simple and honest generals, the few civil officials were basically restless. Feng Jin Wei Ci, and the rest were fine. After all, they were from an aristocratic family and had gentle personalities. However, Feng Zhen and Yang Si were different. Yang Si said, when two armies cross swords, they do not kill the envoys. Yang Si wasn't a feudal lord, he was merely a strategist serving under a feudal lord. He wasn't worthy of Su Bei breaking this iron rule. Jiang Pingji said, since you're not afraid of death, why did you come to me for help? Yang Si said straightforwardly, isn't this just in case? Take Han Yu for example. If this feast at Hongmen was set up by Han Yu, Yang Si felt that his life would be in danger. Seeing that Yang Si was eager to try, Jiang Pingji relented. All right, I'll send a few people to follow you. Not only did Jiang Pingji think that Yang Si was eager to court death, but the idle onlookers could also tell. Fudi Yang Jingrong, every day, I'm on the brink of death. Zigangjiang Pingji, if you court death again, I'll break your legs. The audience even photoshopped a gif of a white crane with a broken leg and crutches extending its leg at the edge of the circle. The words, courting death, were written on the circle, and Yang Si was written on the white crane's head. Jiang Pengji watched as the white crane extended its leg again and again, only to have its leg broken by the washboard again and again. She held in her laughter. The idle onlookers in the live stream room were quite talented. When Yang Si saw who the guard was, he was so scared that his whole body trembled. His nerves were stretched taut. Why did the Lord let Officer Jiang come? Jiang Nongqin lowered her eyelids and said, "The Lord asked me to follow the military counselor to broaden my horizons and protect his safety." Yang Si was speechless. It was just a feast at Hongmen. What could she broaden her horizons? I'm a woman. When ordinary people see women, they'll always lower their vigilance. It'll be more convenient for them to act. Jiang Nongqin did not wear armor. She changed into a plain female dress, which was rare. She pretended to be Yang Si's maid. Her facial features were not very outstanding. Because she had a cold face all year round, her eyebrows and eyes looked very cold and hard. She was not as gentle and beautiful as ordinary women. Even if she was wearing a female dress, she still gave people the illusion that she was carrying a broadsword to hack people anytime and anywhere. She was indeed half a disciple taught by the Lord. Obviously, Officer Zhang's words don't include you and the Lord. Yang Si secretly looked away. He was afraid that it would hurt his eyes if he looked too much. For other women, appearance was very important. If they looked mediocre, they would not be able to be found in a crowd. However, the person in front of him was different. Her aura was like a searchlight, so bright that it was blinding. Jiang Nongqin frowned and corrected him honestly. It's the Lord in me. Even someone as smart as Yang Si was confused by Jiang Nongqin. It's indeed you and the Lord, Jiang Nongqin asked with a cold face. How can I be before the Lord? It's disrespectful. Yang Si was speechless. It was hopeless. Because it was near the battlefield, almost half of the people of Longshui had escaped. The rest were either old, weak, or sick. The population was sparse and the streets were cold. Only a certain mansion in the city was bustling with noise and excitement. It was brightly lit. One could hardly feel the smoke of war in it. Yang Si arrived on time for the banquet. The other party treated him as a distinguished guest and prepared a feast of good wine and dishes. There were even beauties dancing during the banquet to liven things up. They toasted each other and chatted happily. The dancers' clothes were thin and translucent. Their hair was decorated with pearls. As they danced and collided with each other, they made a crisp sound. Their feet were fair and their legs were slender. Their skin revealed a clear texture under the illumination of the orange lights. At first, Yang Si was tense, but as the banquet began, he relaxed. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were cold. Is there anyone you like, Mr. Yang? After the dance ended, the middle-aged man sitting at the head of the table asked Yang Si. Yang Si said, "The dance is good and the person is a beauty." The middle-aged man laughed heartily and pointed at the leading lady to make tea and serve wine to Yang Si. Yang Si asked, "Let's not beat around the bush. There must be a reason for General Zhao's hospitality, right?" The middle-aged man's surname was Zhao, and his name was Xiao. He was originally a famous scholar in Zhangzhou's Eastgate County. Now that he was seeking shelter under Su Pei's camp, he even got the title of a surplus general that was neither high nor low. The title sounded good, but in reality he did not have military power. It was rather like being pampered. Zhao Xiao said, "What reason? I just heard of your deeds and secretly admired you, so I wanted to meet you." Yang Si's expression did not change, but his heart sank. He was not a 3-year-old child. Why would he believe Zhao Xiao's words? Zhao Xiao's name sounded unfamiliar, but no one dared to underestimate what he had done. Years ago, Yang Jian went to the Huangshui conference as a vassal of Dongqing. During the conference, he performed well and caused Prince Changshu to suffer. He became a dark horse at that time. After the conference, Yang Jian's reputation soared and he gained many benefits from the conference. Yang Jian originally wanted to unite the aristocratic families of Dongmen Commandery to fight against the fake Prince Changshu. However, he did not expect Zhao Xiao to be sinister. Afraid that Yang Jian would bring up old scores, he made a move first and poisoned him. The grudge between Yang Jian and Zhao Xiao went back more than 20 years. It was just a small matter. Zhao Xiao had a milk brother who relied on Zhao Xiao's power to bully the villagers. In the end, he was killed by the young and aggressive Yang Jian. The two became enemies because of this. The milk brother was, to put it bluntly, the son of a wet nurse. He was a slave who had nothing to do with Zhao Xiao. This slave also relied on his master's power to bully others everywhere, ruining his master's reputation. He deserved to die. Because of this grudge, Zhao Xiao bore it for more than 20 years. In the end, he took the risk and poisoned Yang Jian to death. Yang Jian was tortured by the poisoned wine for an entire night before he died in agony. It was clear how dark and narrow-minded this person was. After that, with the rise of Yang Jian's son, Yang Tao, Zhao Xiao fled to Nanxing with the fake emperor out of fear of death. Unexpectedly, under the planning of Wang Lin, Yang Tao's strategist, Zhao Xiao set his sights on Nanxing's territory. Helpless, Zhao Xiao could only pack his bags and flee back. Coincidentally, Su Bei took the opportunity to swallow up half of Zhangzhou. Zhao Xiao used his status as an aristocratic family to seek refuge with Su Bei and became a surplus general. This guy said that he admired Yang Si, so he held a banquet to entertain him. Even a pig wouldn't believe this. Yang Si responded carefully. Zhao Xiao continued to summon singers and dancers to liven things up. There were also other aristocratic families at the banquet to liven up the atmosphere. One after another, they urged him to drink. Yang Si could not refuse and could only drink. His alcohol tolerance was decent. Nowadays, winemaking techniques were not good and the alcohol content was not high. Hence, Yang Si did not get drunk. When the banquet ended, the night was already as dark as ink. Jiang Nongqin, who was disguised as a servant, helped him back to the sleeping quarters prepared by Zhao Xiao. This Zhao Xiao? I wonder what he's up to, Jiang Nongqin frowned. Since the banquet started, she had been waiting outside. Although she did not see the scene at the banquet with her own eyes, with her excellent eyesight and hearing, she could imagine most of it in her head. Yang Si lowered his voice and said, "You'll know in a while." Even if he did not mention it during the banquet, he would definitely reveal it after the banquet. Yang Si never expected that Zhao Xiao would prepare such a big gift for him. There's someone in the room. Before she got close, Jiang Nongqin had already sensed the presence of a stranger in the room. Yang Si pursed his lips. Could it be a honey trap? Jiang Nongqin closed her eyes and said coldly, "Throwing a meat bun at a dog is a one-way trip. A honey trap is really stupid." Yang Si was speechless. "Field Officer Jiang, you've gone too far." In order to save face, Yang Si said again, "Maybe it's an assassination?" Jiang Nongqin said in surprise, "If it's an assassination, wouldn't it be faster to poison him during the banquet?" Yang Si was eating happily. He did not refuse any good wine and delicacies, and he was served by a beauty in his arms. He would be a romantic even if he was a ghost. Yang Si was speechless. In order to avoid the awkward conversation, Yang Si pushed open the door of the sleeping quarters. The room was lit by candlelight, and a graceful woman was sitting at the table. A honey trap. Jiang Nongqin gave Yang Si a "take it easy" look and said with a faint smile, "Remember to call for help if there's any danger. I'll be guarding outside and won't leave. If there's no danger, please be careful when military advisor Yang is enjoying the beauty. Don't make too much noise, lest you disturb her sleep. Although it's a free meat bun, it's a waste not to eat it." Yang Si frowned. The woman's back was a little familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Without caring about what Jiang Nongqin said, Yang Si stepped into the room. The woman heard the movement and slowly turned her face. Yang Si stood still and took a few glances. His face suddenly darkened and he took a few quick steps forward. "Why is it you?" Chapter 1156. Why are you here? At this moment, Yang Si did not feel the slightest joy of meeting an old friend in a foreign land. Instead, there was a chilling, killing intent in his eyes. The woman knelt on the mat and bowed deeply to Yang Si with her thin back. She clasped the mat with both hands and did not say a word. Answer. Not only did Yang Si's face turn cold, but his voice also became cold. Why did they look for you? To deal with me? The last 3 words were full of sarcasm and contempt. Not talking. Seeing that she was pretending to be dead, Yang Si was furious and wanted to leave. Seeing that he really turned around, the woman hurriedly knelt and hugged his legs, sobbing softly. Don't go. If you leave, both my son and I will die. Yang Si tried to pull his legs out, but the woman hugged him tightly. He could not move at all and could not break free. Lieutenant Jiang, help. Yang Si tried his best but still failed. He could only shout angrily outside the room. The woman who was hugging his legs was stunned. She saw a maid dressed in plain clothes walk in from outside the door. The maid didn't even look at Yang Si. She raised her hand and grabbed the back of the woman's collar, lifting her up. You want to shout for help for such a woman? Military advisor Yang, do you really not need to see the doctor? He did not eat the meat bun that was sent to him, and his legs were trapped by the meat bun and could not break free. Jiang Nongqin felt that she was out of touch with the whole world. Was a man so thin and weak? She looked down and Yang Si subconsciously took a few steps back. When he understood the meaning of her words, his already ugly face darkened. You two know each other? Seeing that Yang Si did not speak, Jiang Nongqin glanced at the woman who was thrown aside with tears on her cheeks. Yang Si said, more than that. Oh, Jiang Nongqin said. Thinking of Yang Si's usual style, she asked, Dewey couple? Was it a love debt? Yang Si was speechless. He really could not afford to offend women. His previous style was indeed not good, but in Jiang Nongqin's eyes, was it so bad? The woman was a little hurt from the fall, but she did not dare to move closer to Yang Si. Instead, she looked at Jiang Nongqin with a critical gaze. She had been in brothels for more than 10 years, and her eyes were very sharp. She could tell at a glance that Jiang Nongqin, who was still dressed as an unmarried woman, was not a virgin. Jiang Nongqin immediately felt the hostility in the woman's eyes. Jealousy, hatred, contempt, disgust. Wasn't it just a fall? Was there such a big grudge? This is the main course of the Hongmen banquet? Jiang Nongqin raised her eyebrows as she asked Yang Si. Su Bei had gone through so much trouble to invite Yang Si to a banquet. She had thought that it was a honey trap and a plan to sow discord between Yang Si and the Lord. She did not expect that he would actually send a 27 or 28-year-old woman. At this age, she could be preparing to be a mother-in-law, right? Yang Si said snappily, I guess so. The woman in front of him had witnessed the worst part of Yang Si's past. Now that he had been caught red-handed by Jiang Nongqin, he felt uncomfortable all over. The woman asked, Who are you? Jiang Nongqin sneered in response. She did not want to answer. This woman's background was unknown. How could she be qualified to question her? She casually found a place to sit so that Yang Si wouldn't ask her for help later. When Yang Si saw that she refused to leave, he felt even more embarrassed. He only wanted to end the battle quickly and settle the matter as soon as possible. Tell me, why are you here? The woman was frozen by his coldness. Her shoulders shivered and she bit her lower lip. She did not have much contact with Yang Si, but she knew that he had a ruthless temperament. I heard that you've won the favor of a noble and that you're now on a meteoric rise. I don't ask for anything else. I only ask that you do a good deed and save me and fourth son. As long as you ask for it, we can be saved. Yang Si sneered, On what basis? The woman thought about it and gritted her teeth. On what sister said before she died. Yang Si's eyes were filled with murderous intent, but he wore a smile on his face. He asked, You have the cheek to mention them? I've already done my part by redeeming you from the brothel before I left Jiangding County. Now that you've appeared here, you must be up to no good. How can you have the cheek to ask for it? Jiang Nongqin, who was watching from the side, acted as a spectator and watched the drama that was filled with gratitude and hatred. The woman said with tears in her eyes, "I'm just a weak woman. If I didn't do this, I would have been skinned and died without a complete corpse." Yang Si did not want to listen to this person's lies. The woman continued, "I lied to those people and said that fourth son is your flesh and blood. Then they captured him. If you're not willing to help, we really can't live. Yang Jingrong, can you help us for the sake of Dean Yang and the others?" Yang Si was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. Although he had a romantic life like Feng Longzi, he had never thought that he would be a father. The woman repeated the two sentences over and over again. When Yang Si redeemed her from the brothel, she turned over a new leaf and married a man. However, that honest man had a short life. He died not long after, leaving her and the 3-month-old child in her womb. Her mother-in-law had always held a grudge against her past and suspected that she was a posthumous child. She cruelly drove her out of the house. Later, she remarried to another man, who also died not long after. The third man lived a little longer. She thought that her life was stable, but she did not expect that her husband would be captured to do forced labor and die. Life was really hard for a woman with a child. There was chaos outside, so she could only marry again. The fourth man was an idle gambler. When he had no money, he beat her and her son. He even scolded her that she could not have a child after a few years of marriage because she had served too many men in the past. After that, the family was so poor that they could not live on anymore. He actually planned to let her resume her old job and make her son a servant to serve other men. In a rage, she picked up the firewood knife at home and chopped the man to death. The neighbors seized her and sent her to the magistrate's office. In order to survive, she could only mention Yang Si. She did not know anything else, but she knew that Yang Si had met a benefactor and became a superior person. She might be able to survive if she had a relationship with him. Does the military counselor have a son who was left outside? Jiang Nongqin could not help but ask. Logically, Jiang Nongqin felt that the possibility was very high. After all, Yang Si and Feng Zhen were jackals of the same tribe. However, Yang Si said, "There's no such thing. Don't taint my innocence." "But I see that you two are quite close." Yang Si brushed it off. "We just met when we were young. Just now, she said that she lied to others that sea air is your flesh and blood. Could it be that those people want to use a fake son, wife, and child to threaten you? However, Su Bei and the others are not stupid. If you have nothing to do with this woman, they won't believe her words so easily, right?" Yang Si really had no way to refute. That alone doesn't seem to be enough to threaten anything. Jiang Nongqin was puzzled. Yang Si said, "She used to be a prostitute." Jiang Nongqin instantly understood. Everyone knew about Yang Si's background. If he had a son with a prostitute and then abandoned them, he would be laughed at for the rest of his life. He could not choose his parents, but he did the same thing as his father. What did this mean? It meant that this thing could be inherited. The son of a prostitute would not be presentable in the end. Yang Si said again, her son was also detained. If war breaks out, the child will be sacrificed to the flag. Jiang Nongqin's expression darkened. If that was really the case, Yang Si's life would be over. The enemy could use this as leverage to secretly instigate Yang Si to defect. Of course, all of this had to be based on the fact that it was true. "You really have nothing to do with this woman?" "I know her, but there is no relationship. That child has nothing to do with me." Yang Si sighed and said, "She has 2 older sisters. The eldest sister is older than me, and the second sister is the same age as me. Their house is next to the thatched cottage where I study. Her eldest sister is called Xiaonyang, and the second sister is the Dean Yang that I mentioned just now. Although Dean Yang is a woman, she is born intelligent and eager to learn. She can learn almost anything with just a little. As the eldest sister, Xiaonyang doted on her younger sister. She knew that her second sister was attracted by the neighbor's reading and she wanted to learn how to read too. Thus, she shamelessly went to ask for help. At first, Yang Si did not agree. How could an ignorant girl want to learn how to read? Later, he softened and agreed because Dean Yang's talent was beyond his imagination. This made Yang Si want to be serious. After more than a year, Yang Si became familiar with the neighbor. He and Dean Yang were the same age and they seemed to be childhood friends. However, their father was not a good person. When he was young, he owed a lot of gambling debts and was forced to flee to another place. Dean Yang's mother was willing to sell herself to the brothel so that her 3 daughters wouldn't be caught by the debt collectors. She worked hard for many years and got sick. After she died, she didn't even have a coffin. She was buried on the ground with a mat. When Dean Yang's father heard that the debt had been paid, he gathered his courage and came back. This bad person didn't learn his lesson. He hid in another place and gambled indiscriminately. When he came back, he wanted to sell the 3 sisters to the brothel. As mentioned before, Master Yuanjing had picked up Yang Si. Although he didn't bring him back to Langyi to be raised, he gave a sum of money to the farmer who adopted him and asked them to take care of him. Before Yang Si was enlightened, he came to visit him every 6 months. After Yang Si was enlightened, he came to visit him every 3 months. When Dean Yang and her sisters were sold to the brothel by their father for money, Yang Si followed Master Yuanjing to study and learn how to write. When Master Yuanjing came back, he found out what had happened. Yang Si went to the brothel. The 15-year-old Zhaonyang had already combed herself up in a hurry and became a prostitute. Because she had a good foundation and a clean temperament, she became popular for a while. The 2 younger sisters escaped the disaster because they were young. They stayed in the brothel as maids. If he wanted to bring Zhaonyang out of the brothel, he had to spend money to redeem her or run away. Yang Si had no money, so he could only choose the latter. At that time, Yang Si was still very young, but his wisdom was no less than that of an ordinary teenager. Zhaonyang didn't want to be a prostitute for the rest of her life. She didn't want her 2 younger sisters to follow in her footsteps, so she agreed to my plan. There were many thugs in the brothel, but it wasn't difficult to lure them away. Zhaonyang wasn't a top courtesan, and there weren't many people watching her, so she escaped quite smoothly. Unexpectedly, as he spoke, Yang Si glanced coldly at the woman who was trembling and didn't say a word. She was stupid. She only saw that the brothel had food, drinks, and clothes to wear, so she didn't want to leave. Before she escaped, she hid and even sold her 2 older sisters in the end. The brothel was a very cruel place. If the girls who ran away were caught, how could they have a good ending? Zhaonyang knew that their whereabouts had been leaked. Once they were caught, they might still be alive, but Yang Si would definitely be beaten to death. Zhaonyang hid Yang Si in the cellar, and they were also caught by more than 20 thugs from the brothel who came later. Their ending was very tragic. Yang Si hid in the dark cellar, listening to the movements coming from above. The darkness and cramped space of the cellar almost drove him crazy. He wanted to climb out of the cellar countless times, but in the end he restrained himself. He had never hated himself so much for being so weak. Whether it was Zhaonyang, who was 15 years old, or Dean Yang, who had just turned 10, how could they survive when faced with more than 20 wild men? In the beginning, they struggled to survive, but in the end, they were on the verge of death. When Yang Si came out of the cellar, he saw a scene of devastation. Zhaonyang didn't hate him. Instead, she begged him to take care of her 3rd younger sister if he had the ability. Dean Yang's body was green and black. Before she died, she murmured, "It hurts." This incident also changed Yang Si's temperament, and he grew up quickly overnight. Yang Si buried the 2 sisters and hid for a while. Later, he found out who had betrayed their whereabouts. It was my naivety that killed them. If it weren't for me, they might have had a hard time in the brothel, but at least they would still be alive. I'm sorry, but this person is also an accomplice. Yang Si pointed at the woman sitting paralyzed on the ground. I wanted to raise money to redeem her from the brothel before she got married, but she was very stupid. She believed the flowery words of some rich man and willingly became a concubine. Not long after, because of her flamboyant temperament, she was beaten by the legal wife and sold back to the brothel. I came to her and said that I wanted to redeem her, but she said that I could redeem her, but she wanted me to marry her as the legal wife. She made things difficult for me, so I refused. Yang Si was still brooding over the betrayal of the woman. Since she was so eager to die, he simply pretended to be deaf and dumb and watched her flop in the brothel alone. When the world was in chaos, Yang Si thought about going out to explore. Before he left, he asked his errand boy to redeem the woman from the brothel with money. After that, he didn't know what happened. When they met again, the other party actually wanted him to be a father. After Jiang Nongqin heard this, she was speechless for a long time. No matter what Su Bei was planning, he couldn't have used this woman and her child to threaten me. Yang Si said coldly, although I'm dissolute in private, I don't want just anyone. At least, I don't want to touch even half a finger of this person. The woman said timidly, I was still young then, I didn't understand at all. Yang Si snorted coldly, you were young, but you betrayed your sister with a clear mind and a glib tongue. The woman continued, although I was wrong, you also said that my sister didn't blame me. Yang Si sneered, that's why you could escape from the brothel and not die under the hands of some man. The woman revealed a look of despair. Yang Jingrong, how could you be so cruel? How could you bear to watch the only child of the three of us die here? Of course I could bear to. In the future, I'll find 2 good adopted sons for them and put them under their names. The young Yang Si had been affected by that incident, causing him to be depressed and on the verge of a breakdown. But now, he was able to take it lightly. Or perhaps, it could be said that he had seen many people who were even more miserable than this and had long developed a heart of stone. Jiang Nongqin frowned and said, even if you have nothing to do with her, if Su Bei were to blame you and use the mother and son as a reason to criticize you, Yang Si's situation was worrying. Chapter 1157. The woman no longer looked dispirited. Her facial features contorted in agitation. Yang Jingrong, how can you slander Si's bloodline? The woman was so agitated that her chest rose and fell violently. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. She said, his father and I went through a formal wedding ceremony. He's not the bloodline of a benefactor, nor is he the son of a prostitute. I was young and ignorant in the past. That's why I made such a huge mistake. Now that I want to turn over a new leaf, why are you still so aggressive? She was only 6 or 7 years old then. How would she know what a prostitute meant? She only knew that she could eat and drink in a brothel. Wasn't this life much better than being penniless in the past? Yang Si said that she betrayed her sister, but she really didn't know that there would be such serious consequences. She only wanted her sister to come back and enjoy life with her. The woman couldn't help but find excuses to lessen her guilt. Did I stop you when you wanted to turn over a new leaf? Yang Si snorted coldly and looked at her coldly. You shouldn't have bitten people for no reason. Tell me, why should I risk my own safety to save you and your son? Do you really think this is so simple? That it'll be over just like how you served your benefactor in the past? How dare you get involved in a battle between dukes? The woman lowered her head and trembled in fear. Her skinny body trembled like a sieve, making one feel pity for her. Jiang Nongqin pulled out a dagger from her waist and blew on the blade, making the shiny blade even colder. Military advisor Yang, this woman is quite an eyesore. I'm afraid she'll cause trouble. Why don't? She turned her wrist and twirled the dagger in her hand. It was so nimble that it seemed to be a part of her body. It sent chills down one's spine. The woman was so frightened that her face turned pale. Her skinny body leaned back. You can't kill me. She lost her sense of propriety after being frightened. Why would Su Bei and the rest think that she can seduce you? Jiang Nongqin sneered. Honey trap? Why doesn't she look in the mirror and have an idea? It's not enough to just have a face and a body. She has to be intelligent and fearless in the face of danger. Yang Si said, you can't ask for too much. If she could do what you said, she wouldn't have ended up like this. Jiang Nongqin asked, how do you plan to deal with her? Killing people was definitely out of the question. Firstly, Yang Si might not be willing to do it. Secondly, killing people would be suspected of having a guilty conscience, which would instead give the enemy something to use against him. Yang Si spoke as the woman waited anxiously. Let her fend for herself. I don't want to dirty my hands. Once Su Bei found out that the woman had lied to him, he would not show any mercy. The woman became more and more flustered. Ignoring her fear, she crawled on the ground, trying to grab the corner of Yang Xi's clothes. Yang Jingrong, please, help me one last time. Give us a way out. Before her fingers could even touch it, a foot kicked her shoulder, causing her to roll back twice. There's no turning back, but this is your choice. Kneel and walk on. Jiang Nongqin retracted her leg and looked at the woman calmly. The woman looked at Yang Xi's heartless back with tears in her eyes. Sorrow welled up in her heart and she sobbed loudly. After watching for a while, Jiang Nongqin felt bored. When the woman saw her high and mighty appearance, her heart was filled with unbearable anger. Do you think you can get what you want just because I can't have it? The woman covered her shoulder and gritted her teeth. It's just a mere tongfang. Clang, Yang Xi's legs went limp. If he had not reacted in time and grabbed the door frame, he might have fallen out of the corridor. What the hell? Yang Xi looked as if he had seen a ghost. The old man was old and could not be so startled. The woman's vision was limited. Seeing that Jiang Nongqin's hair was unmarried but not pure, she thought that she was Yang Xi's maidservant. At most, she was like a tongfang. She did the work of a servant and had to serve the male master of the house at night. However, she could not be considered a proper master. Jiang Nongqin said with a faint smile, "You said that you can't get what you want. Could it be that you want to cling onto the military counselor and become his legal wife?" The woman's thoughts were exposed. She blushed and lowered her head to avoid his sharp gaze. She had led a tough life in the first half of her life. Now that there was a chance for her to build a relationship with Yang Xi, she would definitely not let it go. Even if she could not become his legal wife, it would be good to be a concubine in his residence. In this way, she and her son would have hope for the rest of their lives. In her heart, her two sisters had already forgiven her for the mistakes she made when she was young. In that case, Yang Xi was the murderer who killed her two sisters. He had the obligation to take care of her on behalf of his sisters. Those were two living lives. This was what he owed. Little did she know that the lives in Yang Xi's hands were in the tens of thousands. He was willing to bicker with her for the sake of his two deceased old friends. Otherwise, he would have beaten her to death long ago. The woman straightened her neck and said, "So what if I am?" "Nothing, he's too old." Jiang Nongqin said, "He's too old to be a boy toy in the backyard." Yang Xi was speechless. If he had not held onto the door frame, he might have fallen to the ground. Jiang Nongqin turned to look at Yang Xi. Military Counselor Yang is already over 30 years old. He's indeed old. Am I right? No, you're right. He had been stabbed several times, but he had to grit his teeth and admit that the other party had stabbed him well. Yes. Whatever the little fairy said was right. Yang Xi came to the banquet out of curiosity. He did not expect to be fed a mouthful of sh*t. He even had a belly full of anger. "Let's go home." Zhao Xiao soon received the news and hurriedly brought people over. "Could it be that the beauty arranged is not to your liking, sir?" Yang Xi said, "Not only is it not to my liking, but it's also extremely nauseating." Zhao Xiao secretly observed his expression and was puzzled. Yang Xi's reaction was very different from what he had imagined. "The servants did not treat you well and neglected you. I'll go and give them a warning now." Zhao Xiao persuaded earnestly, "It's getting late now. Why don't you stay for the night so that I can be a good host? I wonder how that beauty offended you." Yang Xi said, "That person tried to claim friendship as soon as she came up. Her motive is suspicious. Xi has seen her before. She used to be a flower lady in Jiangding County. There were countless people around her. General Zhao gave her away. Is he trying to befriend her or is he trying to pick a fight?" Xi wanted to ask General Zhao what he meant by this. This woman even said with certainty that she had Xi's flesh and blood. Ha, what a joke. She's just a prostitute. Who knows whose flesh and blood is in her belly? What's more, there's nothing between Xi and her. General Zhao comes from a prestigious family. Your family is upright and upright. You definitely won't let Xi be slandered by such a woman, right? Zhao Xiao looked embarrassed and said, "That woman took the initiative to come to me to make a statement. I saw that she had irrefutable evidence and believed her words. I had the intention of reuniting Mr. Yang with the mother and son. Who would have thought that my good intentions would cause trouble? Yang Si sneered. If General Zhao doesn't believe me, you can check Si-er's birth date and the time when Si left Jiangding County. There's a gap of 3 to 5 months. Prostitutes are best at sweet words and sowing discord. General Zhao actually believed them? Zhao Xiao's face turned green and white. Mr. Yang is right. The words of prostitutes cannot be trusted. After all, dirty blood flows in their bones. No matter what, it's not something that can be put on the table. Don't be angry, Mr. Yang. I'll send people to deal with the mother and son right now to restore Mr. Yang's reputation. Chapter 1158. Zhao Xiao seemed to have realized Yang Si's abnormality. He suddenly patted his forehead and smiled apologetically at him. Mr. Yang, I didn't mean to target you with those words just now. Please don't take it to heart. Zhao Xiao hated Yang Si very much. It was not that Yang Si had offended him. In fact, it was his first time meeting Yang Si. He had only heard of his name before. However, Yang Si was born in a lowly family. He was the son of a prostitute. Who knew who his father was? To put it bluntly, any man could sleep with Yang Si's mother with a little money. Wasn't that disgusting? Zhao Xiao even thought that if Yang Si's mother was still alive and he gave her some money to serve another man in front of her son, would she do it? As a son, would Yang Si commit suicide out of shame and anger? How humiliating and mocking would that be? The blood flowing in Yang Si's bones was the original sin. He was just the son of a prostitute. Instead of staying in a brothel and being a pimp to be ordered around, he dressed like a scholar and came out to be an eyesore. Every time Zhao Xiao thought about it, he felt extremely disgusted. What right did he have to be treated as a guest of honor and drink with him? Being in the same room, Zhao Xiao disliked Yang Si for dirtying the air. Suppressing this disgust, Zhao Xiao used the mother and son as a raft to humiliate Yang Si indirectly. He suddenly felt carefree. Yang Si was still indifferent. However, Jiang Nongqin, who was not far away, felt her hands itching. She wanted to put her hand on the dagger at her waist several times. It's okay. Yang Si looked calm and said with a smile, I just heard someone's words and felt that they made sense. Since there is no way back, you have to move forward even if you have to kneel. This is the general principle. This is the sin that I've committed with my own hands. I have to swallow this bitter fruit even if I cry. Zhao Xiao thought about it and suddenly realized that Yang Si was also mocking him. What do you mean, Mr. Yang? He pretended not to know. I heard that when General Zhao was young, you had some disagreements with the late commandant of Dongmen County, Yang Jian. Yang Si had a faint smile on his face as he coldly observed Zhao Xiao's unnatural expression. I heard that Commandant Yang Jian didn't die of a sudden illness. Instead, he fell into the evil trap of a villain and unfortunately died in his prime. Commandant Yang Jian had a great reputation in Zhangzhou, and my master even had an alliance with him. When he was suddenly informed of his death, he was saddened for a long time, and he said that the world lost another loyal and valiant general. The Buddha speaks of karma. That villain who poisoned me should die a horrible death, right? Zhao Xiao's face was livid, and his eyes were wide open from hatred and killing intent, almost to the point of splitting. Yang Si's eyes were slightly closed, and he still looked calm and collected. It was a pain in the ass. Fortunately, although Commandant Yang Jian is dead, his legacy has not been lost. His only son, Yang Tao, was now an outstanding talent. He was so filial to his late father. How could he easily let go of the enemy who killed his father? When his wings are full and he catches the villain who poisoned him. Yang Si glanced at Zhao Xiao and sneered. The hatred of his father's killer is absolutely irreconcilable. Cutting him into 1,000 pieces or flaying him to light a lamp won't be enough to vent his anger. Cutting him into 1,000 pieces was easy to understand, but what was flaying him to light a lamp? Rumor had it that during the troubled times of the 16 kingdoms, there was a small country called Jing. This, flaying him to light a lamp, was a punishment specially invented by the last emperor of Jing Kingdom to amuse his favorite concubine. A long cut was made on the human skin from head to toe, and mercury was poured into it. The prisoner was in unbearable pain, and his skin would break out. In this way, a complete human skin could be removed, and the remaining bloody and skinless body would be squeezed out of the human fat. The prisoner who had lost his human skin would be tied up, and the layer of fat on his abdomen would be dug out, and a lamp would be lit. Just the thought of the scene sent chills down one's spine. Xiao looked at Xianxia with anger, shock, and fear. He was pointing at the mulberry tree and cursing the locust tree in front of Xianxia, so Xianxia simply exposed him and threatened him. Xiao suppressed his fear and cursed in his heart. The son of a lowly prostitute. There are still many government affairs to settle in the military camp. It's not good for me to stay outside for too long to avoid delaying official business. I'll take my leave first. Xianxia declined Xiao's invitation to stay expressionlessly. The two of them hated each other. What else could they do if they stayed behind other than to hurt each other? Xiao had no choice but to let them go. Jiang Nongqin boarded the horse carriage and looked at Xianxia, who was sitting in the carriage with his eyes closed. She lifted the curtain and glanced at Long Shui. Will Xiao, that old fellow, send someone to kill us? Jiang Nongqin was in a bad mood and wanted to find a few people to vent her anger on. Killing the enemy was the best way. It's hard to say. He wants to settle things once and for all, but he can't get past Su Bei. Su Bei was a person who wanted to save face and suffered. He was always acting like an aristocratic family, so it was impossible for him to lower his status and ambush Xianxia. Jiang Nongqin said, I shouldn't have come today. I didn't get any useful information, and instead, I suffered a bellyful of anger. She really wanted to twist Xiao's head off and kick it like a ball. Xianxia glanced at Jiang Nongqin from the corner of his eyes and laughed. What's Field Officer Jiang angry about? Jiang Nongqin raised her eyebrows and asked, Military Advisor Yang, aren't you angry at all? Humans have 7 emotions and 6 desires. Xianxia is just an ordinary person. How can he be immune? It's impossible for him not to be angry, but what can he do even if he's angry? Xianxia sneered, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. Saints also say that when heaven is about to bestow a great responsibility on a man, he must first suffer his will, tire his muscles and bones, starve his skin, and empty his body. So what if he's arrogant? The one who stands at the end is the winner. So what if he's the son of a prostitute? One day, I'll make these people bend their knees and bend their waists, lower their heads, and break their proud and unyielding character. As she spoke, Jiang Nongqin saw Xianxia gripping the corner of the table so tightly that his fingers almost dug into the table. Some people became more and more timid when faced with the malice and attacks of the entire world, until they lost the courage to live. However, Xianxia was different. The more others slandered him, humiliated him, mocked him, belittled him, despised him, and hated him, the more he wanted to live freely. His weakness could not be exchanged for the sympathy and pity of others. It would only become a weakness that his enemies could use to ridicule and belittle him. In that situation just now, if the military counselor had given the order, I would have definitely taken the head of the old thief, Xiao. In Jiang Nongqin's opinion, these weak scholars were all treasures, little princesses that needed to be pampered and pampered. Xianxia said, No, we can't do that. Xiao is still useful. Jiang Nongqin was surprised. What's the use of that old thief? Yang Tao has been expanding his power in Nanxing. Now, he has become an opponent that can't be ignored. Jiang Nongqin thought about it and asked, Do you mean to sell Xiao to Yang Tao as a personal favor? Although it's not right, I've guessed some things. Xia's fingers tapped on the table. The carriage was swaying, and it was so quiet outside that only the sound of the wheels could be heard. How can Field Officer Jiang not find it strange? That woman is Huan Yang from Jiangding County in Qinzhou, which is far away from Shanghai County and Zhe County. Jiang Nongqin was stunned. She really didn't think of this. Qinzhou is Huang Song's territory. According to that woman, she killed her husband with her own hands and was facing the death penalty. In order to survive, she indiscriminately accused me. If that's the case, Do you think it's possible that the woman ended up in Su Bei's hands without going through Huang Song? Yang Si said, the only possibility is that this woman was sent to Su Bei by Huang Song. In other words, Huang Song and Su Bei may have formed an alliance in private. If they didn't have this layer of alliance, Huang Song could have kept this trump card and used it at the right time to ruthlessly defeat Yang Si. Even if that mother and son had nothing to do with Yang Si's reputation would be completely ruined. Refuting rumors would never catch up with spreading rumors. Therefore, Yang Si could basically conclude that the two troublemakers, Huang Song and Su Bei, were in cahoots. Jiang Nongqin's mind was in a mess. If not for Yang Si's reminder, she wouldn't have realized it at all. What does this have to do with Xiao Xiao? Yang Si said, Yang Tao is a filial son. If he knew that Xiao Xiao had already sneaked back to Dongqing and joined Su Bei's camp as a low-key surplus general, do you think Yang Tao could tolerate it? Su Bei has taken over half of Zhangzhou. Yang Tao has yet to settle this score with him. Yang Tao dug deep into Nanxing to search for Xiao Xiao. He never expected that Xiao Xiao would sneak back to Dongqing. Nowadays, communication technology was extremely backward. There were no cell phones, telephones, or the internet. One had to walk when they left home and shout when they made calls. An international letter would take more than half a year on the road. Xiao Xiao sincerely wanted to hide from Yang Tao, but Yang Tao's attention was on Nanxing. Yang Tao really couldn't do anything to him. Su Bei and Huang Song are in cahoots. Why can't our Lord present Buddha with borrowed flowers and do Yang Tao a favor by outflanking Su Bei? Yang Si's gaze was heavy. His eyes were filled with coldness. Officer Jiang, I'm curious. How should this Xiao Xiao die? Anyone who offended him could forget about getting on his good side. The sky had just turned bright when Yang Si and the rest returned. They washed up a little and went to see Jiang Pingji. You went over to have a meal and saved him? Jiang Pingji teased. Su Bei is really stingy. At least send a beauty to entertain him. Yang Si, please stop talking. Everything that happened yesterday was like a nightmare. His heart was in turmoil, but his face was calm and collected. Yang Si briefly explained what happened last night. Then he told her about his analysis of Jiang Nongqin. Yang Si went out for a while. Once he returned, he formulated the next strategic route. They would form an alliance with Yang Tao and besiege Su Bei. Then, they would turn around and deal with Huang Song. After getting rid of Huang Song, they would either try to encroach on Zhongzhao's territory or backstab their new ally, Yang Tao. Jiang Pingji, Yang Si was more skilled at killing acquaintances than she was. Jiang Pingji summoned the civil and military officials in her camp for a military meeting. Most of them voted in favor of Yang Si's suggestion. If Su Bei and Huang Song formed an alliance, it wasn't that Jiang Pingji couldn't fight. It was just that the battle line would be stretched too far. If Huang Song was shameless and directly launched a sneak attack on the main camp in Wanzhou, Jiang Pingji's side would be very passive. If they formed an alliance with Yang Tao, they could set the battle line in the south and restrict the troops of Huang Song and the rest. Who is willing to seek an alliance with Nanxing? Taking the initiative to form an alliance required a sincere attitude. It was necessary to send a capable general. The Sichuan plain of Hu County was less than 10 days' journey from the border of Nanxing. It would take at least a month to find Yang Tao and talk about forming an alliance. However, they weren't clear about the situation in Nanxing. After a moment of silence, Wei Ci stepped forward and volunteered. I am willing to resolve my lord's problems. Among the people in the camp, he was the most suitable. In his previous life, he had assisted in Cui in conquering half of Nanxing. He had spent a lot of effort on that. No one knew it better than him. Jiang Pingji frowned. After a while, she asked, Zixiao, are you confident? 100%. Chapter 1159. Zixiao, please treat this trip to Nanxing with caution. After the crowd dispersed, Qiguan Rang could not help but remind Wei Ci. Wei Ci turned his head upon hearing the voice. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He had a sharp nature. It was not like he was unaware of Qiguan Rang's wariness and suspicion towards him. Aside from official business, they rarely interacted with each other in private, let alone this kind of advice to a friend. Qiguan Rang raised his eyelids and said lightly, "The Lord's decision to form an alliance with Yang Tao was only to reduce the pressure on the battlefront. She wasn't afraid of the alliance between the Huang and Su families. Since they were going to fight anyway, it would be the same sooner or later. When you go to Nanxing, it's best if you can persuade Yang Tao. If you can't, it's fine too. At the end of the day, the war can be fought at any time. The difference lies in the length of time and the degree of difficulty. But there is only one Wei Ci in the world." On the surface, Wei Ci did not show any extreme reaction, but in his heart, he was somewhat fearful. Ever since Wei Ci had ascertained who was responsible for the meteorite falling from the sky, in his past life, he did not expect to gain Qiguan Rang's approval and trust. This was because the theory of rebirth was too absurd. Other than the Lord, no one else would believe it. Since Wei Ci could not be honest, he naturally could not completely dispel Qiguan Rang's suspicions. "Wenjing, do you think there will be other changes during the trip to Nanxing?" Wei Ci pretended to be confused. "That's not it." Qiguan Rang shook his head. "I'm just reminding you to be careful and protect yourself. Don't force yourself." If Wei Ci was just an ordinary strategist, it would be fine. However, he was a fat piece of meat that his lord had her eyes on. She could not let him be taken away by others. Of course, his concern for Wei Ci did not mean that he did not suspect him. Wei Ci accepted the other party's goodwill. However, "I'm afraid the Lord is angry." From the time he volunteered to bring his men to Nanxing, Wei Ci had not found a chance to speak to Jiang Pingji. The two of them met in a public place, so there was no chance for them to talk alone. According to Wei Ci's understanding of her, it was highly likely that she was angry. However, if time could be reversed and he was given another chance to choose, Wei Ci would still step forward. Didn't he want to do his best to help her ascend the throne and create a better and more glorious situation than his previous life? If he couldn't make up for the regrets of his previous life, wouldn't his rebirth be meaningless? Wei Ci rode on the horse and looked back at the tents that were gradually getting further and further behind him, until the tents that were like mountains disappeared into the horizon. To ensure Wei Ci's safety, Jiang Pingji assigned many guards to him. A portion of them transformed into the guards of the courtyard to protect Wei Ci, who was disguised as a fleeing country gentleman. The other portion transformed into refugees and hid in the dark. He would first take the land route, then he would change to the waterway before changing to the land route. He would cross the border between Zhangzhou and Nanxing and enter Nanxing's boundary. Wei Ci thought that Jiang Pingji was angry, so she ignored him in a tsundere manner and even gave him a one-sided Cold War. Little did he know that his situation was completely under Jiang Pingji's control. The yin-yang jade pendant was a gift from Jiang Pingji. Wei Ci always wore it close to his body. He never took it off even when he bathed. In his eyes, the yin and yang jade pendant was just a jade pendant given by his lord, but in Jiang Pingji's eyes, it was an excellent dating artifact. It was fine if Wei Ci was far away. She would be able to see him whenever she missed him. The reason why she did not tell Wei Ci her parting words in private was that she did not want to put too much pressure on him. "Leng Jun, we have arrived at Nanxing's boundary." Wei Ci came out of the cabin when he heard the voice. The scenery of the lake and mountains before him was mesmerizing. It was a vast expanse of blue, and the lush green mountains were falling backward. Nanxing was much warmer than Dongqing. When summer came, the scorching sun shone on the earth. Occasionally, there would be continuous rain. Half a month ago, he was still wearing his spring clothes. When he arrived at Nanxing, he immediately changed into a summer shirt made of light material. This is Xuanjiang River. Wei Ci looked at the familiar scenery and suddenly felt like he had traveled through time. It was as if he had returned to the time when he accompanied En Chui to Nanxing. It was the season when the river water flowed rapidly. The ships heading south almost did not need boatmen to paddle. They could travel 1,000 miles in a day. The wind from the ships blew against their faces. "I didn't expect to have a chance to return in this lifetime." There was no one around. Wei Ci murmured. He stood at the bow of the ship and gazed into the distance. The wind from the river passed through the mountains and the water, blowing against his face. It blew against his wide sleeves and his headscarf. Wei Ci volunteered to come to Nanxing not only to persuade Yang Tao to form an alliance. In reality, it was not difficult to persuade Yang Tao. Any strategist under the Lord's command could do it. Yang Tao was a filial son. His hatred for Zhao Xiao was like Enchui's hatred for the 4 factions of Nanman. He would hack the enemy into pieces even if he had to go to heaven or hell. Being loyal was his strength, but it was also his most fatal weakness. If not for Yan Lin's old maid's constant reminders, Yang Tao would have courted death long ago. His experience from his past life told Wei Ci that Yang Tao was not meant to rule the world. Wei Ci's expression was a little complicated as he thought about what happened in his past life. In his past life, those who fought with His Majesty for the world either killed themselves because they could not stand the failure or were beheaded by His Majesty. Most of them did not have a good ending. It was not that His Majesty could not tolerate them. On the contrary, these feudal vassals had been raised by the chaos of the world. How could they be willing to be under someone else when the world was at peace? They always had various concerns. They were worried that His Majesty would be afraid of them and harm them. Rather than struggling at death's door under his old enemy, it was better to end it all. If he died before the chaos ended, he would be considered a hero of his generation. Yang Tao was the odd one out among them. His Majesty used powerful troops to suppress Yang Tao. Yan Lin was defeated and fell into the trap. Guess what that brat Yang Tao did? He was willing to give up everything in exchange for Yan Lin's life. At that time, Yang Tao still had an extremely rich territory. If he gathered his troops, he could still resist for a few months. He surrendered without hesitation. Yan Lin was so angry that he picked up his weapon and hammered Yang Tao. Wei Ci really wanted to cry out for His Majesty. His Majesty was not a narrow-minded person. In his past life, when Yang Tao surrendered, His Majesty did not make things difficult for his family. He even gave him the important task of leading troops to conquer the world. After the Jiang dynasty was founded, Yang Tao was conferred the title of nobility. Although it was not hereditary, as long as his descendants were successful, at least his family would be able to gain a foothold in the court. That was not all. He was also one of the 10 generals who entered the Golden Scale Pavilion. If the title of nobility was a little exaggerated and somewhat comforting, then entering the Golden Scale Pavilion was a real military achievement. Of course, the Golden Scale Pavilion in his past life was not the Golden Scale Pavilion of today. Today, the Golden Scale Pavilion was an academy where countless books were gathered. But in his past life, the Golden Scale Pavilion was also known as Path to Heaven, meaning to ascend to heaven in one step. Only civil and military officials who had made great contributions to the people, the court, and the emperor were qualified to have their portraits placed in the pavilion and enjoy the incense offerings of the royal family and the people. Even if the emperor came to the Golden Scale Pavilion, he still had to dismount from his carriage and walk to offer incense. Yang Tao was in the top 5. His friend and mother, Yan Lin, was in the top 3. No ranking. Not popular. Smiley face, angle, this was very sad. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.